Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to our PAX East 2024 recap special. And it has been a heck of a PAX East. We are recording this the Tuesday after, so we are all feeling it in our own way.
Yeah, I would say I'm not quite recovered, as you can hear. Don't do karaoke the Thursday night before a weekend of interviews on the PAX floor, because then you'll sound like this for a week.
It will be reflected in our interviews. You'll hear the timeline of how we're all doing.
Not only will there be great interviews, but also a narrative through line on the health of my voice.
We were hoping to have Sarah on here as well for a little bit of commentary, because she also got to play a bunch of games we didn't, but unfortunately tested positive for COVID Saturday night. And so there were some things I wanted to play on Sunday that we just rented a car and drove back to the city. And I'm still testing negative, and most of the folks that we hung out with have as well. So let's hear it for masks and isolating.
Right? Yeah. Though the CDC would have you believe differently. But yeah, testing negative so far. Going to test again tomorrow as of when we're recording, just to kind of make sure. But I've been feeling fine. So except for my voice sounding like I swallowed a frog,
I'm just tired.
Yeah, I mean, that's the gist. But we did get to see a lot of awesome games. I mean, I don't even know where to start. There was a ton of stuff that we saw and we did get interviews for. We had a ton of appointments. I think shout outs to Stride PR for sure, as among many other PR reps, both on the ground for each individual developer and the broader PR firms, connected with us via email, and we were able to get a ton of great appointments. I think a strong shout out has to go to Apogee, as we saw, four of their games?
Four of their games.
And so appreciate them working with us. We never really announced it on Twitter. I still have to put up a tweet, but we are one of their approved content creators covering a ton of their games. So you can expect to see more of their stuff over the years. And that's really exciting. And they held up to that end of the bargain by making sure we came back time and time again to the suite where they were showing off their games. And we will talk a little bit about those, but we have a ton of interviews on them as well.
Yeah, no, that was a wonderful thing. We had one on the books, and then that day they went, come back tomorrow, let's find some time, and I'm definitely excited for what we'll be covering as far as Apogee games in the future, because they've got a very wide portfolio going on. It was a very interesting PAX as well, because it felt like there definitely were no big publishers there. Nintendo was on the floor, but mostly for Pokemon cards.
Yeah, it was like they were spiritually there, and that was about it.
Right, which meant that this PAX, more than usual, was for indie games and smaller games. And so, Devolver Digital wasn't there, and they usually, at any PAX, East, West, or otherwise, have a large, almost anchor spot on the floor. And so I was not alone in feeling a little lost in terms of where do I go, what do I do? And some of the other publishers, PM Studios, some of the other booths like Games from Poland or PAX Rising, kind of had to fill that up. And it meant a long roster of games, but with only a few screens. And despite there not being the big pieces that you're used to, there was still a lot. I feel like the more I look, the more I hear from other folks, the more I realize I touched a fraction.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is even though some major players weren't there, not just Devolver, but Yacht Club, who's been at almost every PAX in the last 2 or 3 years,
absolutely,
was not on the floor as well. And I think part of that is they're probably head down on Mina. Mina felt very solid when I played it last. And so I feel like that's probably coming out either this year or early next year, and they may just be focusing on that. And they're also a West Coast company, so they may just be focusing on a shorter travel budget for doing Seattle instead of Boston. It's hard to say. There's no insider information here. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
But those gaps were filled by some other folks who hadn't been there as consistently. For the first time, I think in many years, the Behemoth had one of their giant arcade cabinet-filled booths that they haven't had in a long time, where you can play all of their games on arcade cabinets, and they had every one of their games playable, including their newest, Alien Hominid Invasion. Mm-hmm. We did an interview at West a couple years ago with one of the folks who worked on Invasion, and it's a really great game. And they are, as we talked about in our Xbox 360 retrospective episode that's coming soon, the Behemoth is for me, 1-to-1 with the 360, and it's so nice to see them out on the floor. I bought some merch. I got some photos. We didn't have any interviews with them this time, but we do potentially have some things cooking for chats with them and folks over there in the future, which is really exciting. But it was great to see them back in full force in a way that they hadn't been in many years.
And it's very funny that, as Matt referred to, we have an upcoming Xbox 360 retrospective, but because my home has never been a strong Xbox home, there's been a lot of things that the Behemoth has done that have sort of slipped through the cracks a little bit. I'm familiar with a lot of their titles, but going around those large arcade machines, Sarah played Battle Block Theater for the first time.
That's a good one.
Had never ever played it before. And she's like, what is this on? When did this come out? Why have I never heard of this before? Because it is so utterly up her alley. So we're going to figure that out for future times.
Yeah, I realized I don't have a lot of their games on PC. I thought I did. I do own Alien Hominid HD and Alien Hominid Invasion, but I don't have Battle Block Theater or Pit People. I guess I had them on 360 back in the day. I do have Castle Crashers on Switch. And so like I am probably going to reinvest in a bunch of their games that I know I've played, but I don't actually have on a console at the moment. For the record, I did play some Alien Hominid HD when I got home from PAX, and it runs like a dream on the Steam Deck. It's great. And I forgot how goofy these old Flash games were. It was a blast to revisit. But yeah, that was like kind of one of the major highlights for me early on because it was just nice to see them back. But one of the first games that I got to play that you didn't, that we don't have an interview for, unfortunately, because it was just I was running around during media hour, was a game called Venture to the Vile. It's this gothic action platformer puzzle game. There's a little bit of combat as well. It takes place in this world where everyone wears animal masks. There's no explanation for it. It's just how they live. The VO is muffled, and it's like Simish, except you can hear certain words in it. But essentially, the VO was recorded like they were wearing masks, and it was muffled, which is really interesting. And it was a lot of fun. You start out as a kid in the demo, get to play through a childhood trauma, and then you play as an adult. It was really fascinating. The controls were a little loosey-goosey, but this is, I think, in the very early stages still. And even if it's not, it could just be that I was getting used to it. But I really enjoyed the aesthetic. I liked the world. I liked the music. And a friend of mine, Masao, is one of the people working on the game and was the person who actually called me over to check it out. I'm going to look into having Masao come on closer to the game's release to talk more about it.
Yeah, a media hour was very much that for me as well. I spent just about all of it playing Heartworm at the Dread XP booth. And you got to play that as well. Just a very cool, stylish PS1 throwback survival horror game. Very Fatal Frame in that you're using a camera instead of a gun to deal with the strange things around you. A good utilization of modern 3D design to create a very specific aesthetic. It still had a 3D camera, but it went for fixed camera angles with certain exceptions so that you still had that feeling of anticipation that came from playing Resident Evil. The tank controls are there, giving you that feeling of powerlessness. You're not some action superstar here. You're just a person with a camera dealing with some very strange things, and I'm very excited to play more of it when it comes out. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to speak with the developer for the game, but he was at PAX, and hopefully we'll get to follow up with Dread and all of them in the future.
Yes. Also, fun fact, good friend of the show and previous guest, Hunter Bond, is now one of the two owners of Dread XP, which is exciting.
Yes.
Shout out to Hunter, who's a delight. And so, of course, we're going to have those folks on in the future. But yeah, I mirror everything Geoff said. I had a blast with it. The controls were a little wonky, but I think that's of the aesthetic.
It definitely felt very much to the point. Like there were some additional buttons and concessions made there that like, no, this was deliberate.
Yeah. And you know what? Even if the controls aren't tight, I feel like that's an easier thing to fix as you get closer to release. The aesthetics, the music, the vibe was definitely on point and is definitely something that I want to try once it's been cooking longer and actually gets released because I really dug what was there, what we got to experience in that short demo.
Yeah, and I was realizing while playing through it how much the puzzle aspect of old survival horror games are given a better chance to thrive these days. I was at the Mighty Yell booth at one point this weekend because I like the big con and we love the people at Mighty Yell. It is sort of a point-and-click game, but saying that, you can see the light leave people's eyes when they hear that genre. It's a lot easier to work those sorts of puzzles, a little bit of lock and key and a little bit of find whatever pixel it is with either modern graphics or modern throwback graphics. You can have a little more going on under the hood that you couldn't in previous generations on PC, PlayStation 2 even, that gives me some fun, like, escape room vibes that I think survival horror was getting at before there was a really big amount of escape rooms. This is something I was observing during Heartworm, that I'm having a lot more fun looking for random crap here than I ever did in any of the first 3 Resident Evil games. And I loved looking for random crap in the first 3 Resident Evil games. You can have everything on the surface look like a throwback, but everything under the hood, which is another avenue of what Matt and I talk about all the time, of throwback games should feel like how you remember them, not actually be like how they were.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so I wanted to make sure that we devoted some time to these 2 games that we saw that we didn't get to really chat with anyone. Going down my list in order, at least, one of the first games we did get to see was a side-scrolling beat-em-up anime aesthetic style game called Ra Ra Boom. It's cheerleaders in this sci-fi futuristic world fighting against robots, narrative hook. Midwest Games are publishing it. It was phenomenal. We had a blast playing it. They hit you with a narrative hook, a heartbreaking narrative hook in the first 2 minutes of the demo. It was quite well done.
And it was great beat-em-up design in general. The character designs that were all unique and interesting, the world around it, and in the design of the game. Very much that belt-scroller kind of beat-em-up. It was subtle, but the lanes were there. So you could kind of see where you were on the screen versus what you were attacking, which was a nice piece of conveyance while still giving you a challenge. Prevented a lot of the sort of frustrations I often have when playing beat-em-up games for the first time.
Yeah, totally. And I love that hook design-wise because it's not intrusive, but it doesn't take away from the aesthetic of the backgrounds and how the game worked. It was a delight to play, and we chat with Ben, who is the head of Midwest Games, about not only this game, but a lot of the other games in their catalog and kind of why they went into publishing and why Midwest Games is different from
Their
other
mission.
publishers. Yeah, their mission. And I think it's a really great chat. One of the next games that we played, and we might as well go through the gauntlet of...
Let's do Apogee all at once here.
Yeah. So the Apogee games we saw were Wizardom, we saw Lucid, we saw Little Lands, and we saw Questmaster. So starting with Wizardom, it is a boomer shooter, pixel aesthetic game, but instead of playing a buff dude with a gun, you are playing a variety of characters, we've been informed, although only one in the demo, and you are a mage or a wizard, and you can cast spells, get items that allow you to cast spells. You have a magic mace, you're fighting orcs and goblins. It was really neat. It was kind of like, what if you took your D&D wizard and put him in a Doom boomer shooter style game?
That idea of hidden secrets and hidden walls and weird items has always been in those boomer shooters. Doom was full of them, and carrying that over into a more D&D-ish or even 80s computer RPG style dungeon crawling, because it is dungeon crawling. It's just dungeon crawling with real-time monsters coming at you, and that's pretty excellent. The boomer shooters that I remember loving when I was a kid were the ones that were a little more occult or magical or out there. Doom, of course. Doom 2, yeah, but also Hexen, but also Blood. Those were so much fun for me, and not just because of edgy 12-year-oldness. And so seeing this with also a much brighter palette, we say all of these things in like boomer shooters and whatnot, it is brightly colored as hell, and you're fighting goblins and everything else. And I imagine there'll be other environments in the future, but just as there's characters we haven't seen yet. But the gameplay loop is very fun, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, and congratulations to the creator of the game for having a recent baby, but because of that, he was not able to join us at PAX East. So instead, Geoff and I were delighted to be reunited with Jaren Moore, who was a previous guest on the show many years ago, back when Apogee was really starting to spin up hardcore and get back into publishing hardcore. And it was a delight to chat with him then, and he gave us the rundown on Wizardom since the dev couldn't be there on site, and it was a blast to reunite with Jaren. It was a lovely little reunion, and so in the interview we get into like why this game is important, what attracted them to it, and then some like broader Apogee stuff as well.
Yeah, and I don't remember if it's mentioned in the interview or not, but I took a note of this, that same sort of commitment to what they're trying to do, the key artist is Dennis Lubbe, who's also done a bunch of the Ultima key art as well.
The next game that we got to see was Questmaster. So Jaren, before we left that appointment, said, well, when you guys come back, we have this game where you build dungeons like you're in Zelda and it has a pixel Link to the Past aesthetic? Would you like to see it? And we were both very much yes, please.
Yes, extremely enthusiastic about it. And the fact that it's cooperative dungeon building while also dungeon crawling. It allows for up to 3 players. So Matt, Sarah, and I all sat and played it together. And while you look at it and it's got a bit of that Link to the Past look, really, if you're going to compare it to a Zelda game, compare it to Four Swords Adventures for the GameCube. Playfully but antagonistically interacting with each other. There's the different items that you can use, but really only one person at a time can or should use them, so you're building all of that up. You can traverse the dungeons as a single player, but you have to command the other ones, which again put me in mind to the formations of Four Swords. It's early days for them, and it's going to be early access in a little bit. Quest Masters isn't out yet, but all of the design ideas that they have in putting the dungeon together are so very intuitive. When I was chatting with one of the developers, I asked about Zelda Classic, which was an old PC, basically freeware or open source Zelda maker, where people could not only make dungeons, but entire quests, overworlds, everything else, import graphics, and make all of that happen. I played a ton of Zelda Classic levels and custom worlds over the years, but I never made it myself because it always felt obstructive or unintuitive for me. This, you put a door in a wall, it starts the next room, because what are you doing the door for anyway? And because you're designing for dungeons, there is a much larger plane. You can design for up to 100 floors in a single dungeon, so you can make them all small, all big. You can have long winding corridors, and you don't have to be constrained by the same sort of design questions and practical worries that Nintendo had to deal with on the Super Nintendo or even on the GameCube. I'm very excited to see what dungeon masters are going to start putting their adventures into Quest Masters, because this is absolutely a map making tool. I might just get this just to make dungeons to run a D&D group through, but also I just had a lot of fun playing it.
Yeah, it's really a neat take on it. And also the multiplayer, it adds a uniqueness, right? Because it's very easy to look at this and go, oh, it's a Zelda-like to a T. Like it's single player.
It's got some secretive mana there too.
But not only that, the fact that the map maker is also multiplayer and that you can create with your friends, I think is something that I don't think any other creation tool has. As far as I know, though admittedly I haven't played Mario Maker in a very long time, it's single player. Only one person can make the maps. And this, making the map creation also multiplayer, allows you and your friends to get creative together in a way that I think no other creation game really has leaned into. Typically, most creation tool games are like, even the PC-based like Mega Man Maker that exists, I think they're all just one person making a thing. The fact that you can collab with your friends in that way makes this game, I think, way unique compared to its contemporaries.
They don't have a release date announced yet. They've got a few parts already figured out. They're implementing more, but I'm very excited for almost party creation where that's going.
Yeah.
That's something that's very unique and completely theirs. As much as we're referencing all of these other things, Quest Masters still feels very much like its own thing.
This is one of the Apogee games we didn't get an interview with the developer, but we do plan on having a longer form chat about talking about dungeon making, Zelda, and the influence that had on this game, and what makes this game unique, because it's not just a Zelda-like. It's not trying to rip off Zelda. It's doing what a lot of games that try to build from Zelda do and make it its own. Like, the graphics are nostalgic, but still feel their own. It's a unique feel. The characters look different. It's kind of this fun collaborative experience. And I'm looking forward to having a longer form chat about it, because I think it's very easy for a game like this to be looked at as a ripoff, and I don't feel it's that at all, right?
Absolutely not.
And not even close. But on the face value, if you don't know, you could perceive it that way. And I want to make sure that it's known that this is something wholly unique and incredible, but taking advantage of a pixel aesthetic, which anyone here knows that I'm a sucker for, but making it something completely unique that you can really sink your time into.
We do know that most of the time, pixel art does not necessarily make a ripoff or anything like that, but they lean into the magic of what they're doing. And for a different kind of look to a Zelda-ish experience, we also got to play Little Lands.
Yes, Little Lands was a delightful game that looks like the Link's Awakening remake, for an aesthetic. It has its own look, but it's like kind of working off the Link's Awakening kind of claymation toy look that the Switch remake leaned into. And it has that kind of like top down, go on an adventure feel, but it also has Animal Crossing style, Stardew Valley style, like life sim elements to like grow crops and make friends and social sim aspect. It's just this delightful little game where you're just a kid on a quest. Think Pokemon and that sort, as far as like just kind of going out into the world and doing a thing. Parents and grandparents not having second thoughts about you running out into the woods where goblins poop purple turds everywhere. I promise it's actually relevant to the demo we played.
Yeah, that actually happens.
But what I really love about this game is its heart. It's easy to make a life sim. It's not easy to translate the heart and fun of an Animal Crossing, and I feel like this game really did get that. We'll have an interview at the end of the episode with Kyle, who's one of the co-developers on this project. I mean, he was a delight to chat with, and hopefully we'll have a side quest from him in the nearest future. He seemed jazzed to do it. But what I loved about my time hands-on with Little Lands is that it feels as intuitive as you would expect something would feel when looking at the game. And the charm and humor was, really well done. For me, a big thing was that when you create your character, you can choose any hair, style, look. There's no restrictions based on gender, which is always nice when in the character creator. Even though you're making a cute little villager-esque kind of simplistic character, still nice to not have those limitations. There was a huge variety in hair color and skin color, which is also greatly appreciated. I think our interview goes way more in depth on some of the hard-hitting questions that are really important, like how far you can get with a ceramic pot if you continue to carry it further than you should.
I mean, what's the point of a demo if you aren't living that infinite monkeys at infinite typewriters experience of how far does this go?
Exactly.
It's interesting in thinking about it that there are a few games that were showcased at PAX East that sort of have that combination of adventure and crafting, whether one serves the other or they simply coexist. We didn't get a chance to sit down with Magical Delicacy while we were at Whitethorn Games, but that is another game that seeks to kind of bridge that. And I need to get around to playing the demo so that I can answer whether or not, or how I feel about it, I suppose.
Yes, for sure. Moving on with our Apogee journey, the only game left to discuss is, of course, the game that we were most excited to see, which is, of course, Lucid, made by the Matt Black Studio, aka Eric Manahan, who was on site and was a delight. This is Celeste meets Metroidvania, but it was more than that. I mean, even just watching Geoff play, and I'll have less to say just because Geoff was the one who got hands-on, from what I could see, it looked like it's not just taking influence from Celeste and broader Metroidvanias, but to me, I saw a very specific Metroidvania in it, which we'll get to in a minute when you talk about some of the mechanics. Needless to say, anyone who, before we even talk about it, who saw our coverage or follows us on Twitter or other social media, we did award our game of show to Lucid because of how much we loved it, which is a fun thing that then Eric, of course, was very excited about and did email me literally the next day saying how great it was to meet us and that he's excited to talk more Vidya games with us, Vidya.
The insider term for it.
Right, exactly.
Clearly.
And so that was delightful. But I mean, I loved what I saw of this game. The mechanics, the music, the gameplay, the graphics, all of it really worked in a way that I wasn't that doubtful that it would. But Geoff, talk about being hands-on with this game and like what it really felt to play Lucid.
Well, I'll put it this way. I did not realize you were speaking to Eric at all during my time playing that game.
It was very brief, but yeah.
Whatever. I did not realize you... Matt, if you weren't sitting next to me when I started playing that game, you could have been anywhere. I got sucked in. This is, yes, absolutely. They used the term Celestoidvania to kind of cutely portmanteau it even more clumsily, which is frankly what we do with genres. And so why not keep that tradition alive? The design of it does have that kind of on the smaller but distinct side of sprite size, like Celeste does, with so much personality behind the characters. The combat mechanics are part of the traversal mechanics as well. Your sword slashes and your dashes are how you climb up walls, traverse across different pieces of the background. And the part where I absolutely lost it, cackled like a madman, felt this sort of flow state and pull that I have not felt in a platform game in a very long time. When we got to an area where, okay, you have your dash, which you can continue your momentum when you jump while dashing. Very Mega Man X is how I always think of it. I know Celeste does it. I know so many other games do it. Mega Man X is where my brain goes. There were parts of the terrain where if you started dashing, you just kept dashing. And if you leapt from one of those parts of the terrain to another part, the dash would continue. And they definitely had it nicely designed so that that flow state of don't lose your momentum, just keep going, bounce, jump, slash, go, double jump, air dash, land, bounce, hit that wall, go across these things. Don't touch the ground as you reset your double jump several times as you traverse up different things. Get back onto another piece of dash sustaining terrain as you just continue through. I had never seen the stage before. I'd never seen anything before, but it just felt correct, challenging, just the right amount of anxiety and adrenaline. And this was just in the demo portion. There was still challenge. There were still secrets to find. And definitely, I came out of that and that just sort of, you release a breath that you didn't know you were holding. And I just want to see more. I want to play more. There were so many great games at PAX East, different studios and publishers trying all kinds of wonderful things that I am excited to champion and looking forward to telling more people about. But God damn it, Lucid just hooked me.
Yeah, it's funny when you were playing, one of the mechanics was to like swing your sword to get on certain walls to like elevate your jumps even more. I looked at that and Eric was near us at the time. He had another longer appointment, but he ducked in just to say hi and let us know that he was stoked that we were playing. When I told him I backed the game, he's like, hell yeah. And then we were chatting, and when you started doing that, I was like, by the way, I know you said that this is inspired by Celeste as well as Metroidvanias, but I see the messenger in the way you're jumping by hitting things. And he went, I need to talk to you more, and then ran off. And it was like, I had hit on a thing. He told me later, because I ran into him at the Omni, which is the hotel across from the Westin where I was staying. He said that when I said that, the reason he replied that way is because as a designer, when you like certain games, you don't necessarily go out of your way and say, I'm going to design this thing to be like The Messenger. But The Messenger is one of his favorite games, as it should be. And he said, that made me realize that's a thing I designed for. It never occurred to me that that's what I was doing, but you pointing it out made it obvious. And that there's tons of other stuff like that. And that's why he wants to talk more with me and with us, is because of being able to notice nuance like that he didn't even see.
Sometimes it takes that outside thing, and anyone in any creative field knows that feeling of sometimes you are so focused on the bark that you need someone to point out something else in the forest.
Yeah. I'm very excited for this game. We don't have an interview with Eric. Unfortunately, he was very busy. It was clearly the most popular game in the suite, but we do have a promise from him to come on to chat more long format. And so likely we will kind of keep that in our back pocket for when Lucid is closer to release so he can come and promote the game and talk about it. But we are excited to have Eric on at some point in the future. And of course, as I said earlier, we did awarded our game of the show, which was kind of a unanimous choice. It's funny, friend of the show and one of our PAX attendees, Jacob McCourt, when I told him that's what we were going to do, he said, but you didn't even play it. I said, I didn't have to. Geoff's reaction and getting to watch it was enough. It was visceral enough. Look, I assumed Lucid would be the unanimous game of the show. Turns out us and all our friends awarded it. Other folks didn't, or maybe they didn't at least yet. But like us, 6-1 Indie, SDGC, and Pass the Controller, all friends of the show, also awarded it their game of show. Along with some others, they give game of show to a few folks. But like, that's pretty neat. It shows that we all kind of have a similar aesthetic, oeuvre, taste, what have you, which is unsurprising, but is nice to see line up that way.
Yeah, one of the things that I really enjoy about going to PAX and conventions like it these days is, Matt, you and I and some of our friends who do other shows and have other forms of game coverage all getting on a group chat together. And some of it's just for trying to figure out meeting up, and a lot of it is also for, I just played this, holy shit.
Yeah.
That's how I played Biomorph at PAX West. It's how I wanted to go play Enter the Chronosphere, but I made a schedule for Sunday morning, which I wasn't able to make. But there's a couple of games that were sort of I didn't get to play them, but I heard great things, including Enter the Chronosphere, Let's Revolution, which I think was Jacob's game of show,
Yes.
and Memories Reach as well, which I was intrigued in some of the preliminary emails before PAX, and I've heard great stuff since, but not anyone in the group chat right now, but I don't think that's anything against it. It's just, there's a lot of games.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I ended up seeing Slay the Princess just before I left on Sunday of PAX East last year. And
Right.
it ended up being our game of show because I decided because you weren't there. But I did get the post confirmation afterwards because I pretty much sent you the link to the demo on the Steam page and said, play this, I will say nothing. And you agreed.
Have you, speaking of, to get slightly off topic, have you played the update to it yet?
I haven't, but I've heard some that they added a bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to yet either. I was just curious.
Not yet. It's on the list. They said they added some really cool controller support, so I think I may wait and try it on the Steam Deck just to see how that works, how it runs differently.
I think I might do that too.
But to double back to one other game we saw between our Apogee sessions, I got to go hands-on with RZ, the Jewel of Faramore, which is by CDI Software, and it is a CDI-like. For those unfamiliar, Philips CDI was a very short-lived video game console, and famously, they got the rights to Zelda for 3 games, and they were all bad in different ways, and 2 of them were bad in a very specific way. They had very weird animation style, very stilted voice acting, and impossible platforming and action gameplay. Well, the solo dev of RZ, Seth, decided, hold my beer, I could do that better. And not only is he famous for remasters of both CDI games that are available on PC, but he also created his own CDI-like, but it's like what we used to say with Infernax. It's like, what if a Zelda CDI game, but better? And it's incredible. And I can say now, as of when we're recording, I played the bulk of this game. So I liked the demo so much that I immediately bought the Switch copy, which was available at limited. This was through limited run because they published it. Got a copy of it. I'm glad I did because it sold out shortly after I bought mine, which I found out. But I liked it so much that I bought it and then proceeded to play it on my train ride home, and then play it the next day on my commute, and then play it again last night. And now I think I'm on the final dungeon. So it's only about 3.5 to 4 hours long, but it's delightful. The cutscenes and voice acting are made to mimic those older games, but still have a lot of charm and humor. The graphics are incredible. The lead character, RZ, is really great. The voice acting is delightful. And the gameplay, frustrating in the right way, but really fun and engaging. I was blown away by this. And we had a great chat with Seth, which will come up a little later, but I really dug it. Geoff, I know that you bought it sight unseen when they did the online pre-order for it, right?
I actually played it briefly at PAX West as well.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
I did play it at PAX West, and I was worried about getting to PAX East and their convention exclusive cover version of it being sold out and being left in the dust. So yeah, I already pre-ordered it, and then we got there and went, you have it in stock. Damn. So you played it after me and then played it before me. So that also is just good confirmation that when it arrives, I'm going to have a great time with it. It's not as if I don't already have a huge backlog.
That is true. But yeah, it was a great game, and it was fun to chat with Seth about why he did this. I mean, it's the same kind of question we asked Hunter Bond way back when, is like, above and beyond anything else, why? And he had some really great answers. I'm excited for y'all to get to hear that. The next thing I want to talk about in order is we broke from our format, sort of, and decided to play a board game while we were at PAX. So we got an appointment to play the Divinity board game, a thing that we had wanted to play it unplugged and just didn't get a chance to. And instead, we got an hour-led session where it was me, Geoff, our mutual friend, the wonderful Matthew Finneman, and of course your incredible spouse, Sarah Moonen. And the 4 of us got to play a section of the campaign of the Divinity board game, and then do an interview in video form over on SDGC's channel, where me and Matthew Finneman interviewed Kieran, one of the developers on Baldur's Gate 3, and I believe the lead developer on the board game, or one of the lead developers on the board game. And it was a wonderful little chat. But I really dug the board game.
It was a lot of fun. It actually felt a lot like the kind of board game that my usual gaming group plays, where we are always a little too disorganized to have an ongoing D&D campaign despite our best efforts. But there are more than a few large-scale board games that are meant for multiple play sessions. We haven't gotten into Gloomhaven yet. I've just been doing that online. But there are other games that aren't even legacy games. The one in particular we're playing now is called Sleeping Gods. But the way that the Divinity board game captured the mechanics, the personality of the characters, and also all of the little design quirks that you appreciate when you play enough board games where, spots where you're supposed to put little cards and slide little tokens, they have little depressions that they've carved in so that they stay in that spot and they don't just all blow away. It's not magnets, but it actually is all you need. And Sarah had a lot of fun with it as well, especially given that she had never played any of the Divinity games. So I and both Matts have experience with Divinity Original Sin, but Sarah did not. And the fact that everybody was able to have a lot of fun and build a lot of personality behind all of their choices really speaks to the strength of the property and the strength of the design.
The design shown best in moments where, like, we wandered into a room and there was a painting and you could take an action to steal said painting. If you did, it became a one-handed weapon that you held in one hand. And because I was playing a sorcerer or mage, I was playing Thane, I could wield my wand in one hand and the painting in another, and you get a free action to throw the painting at someone as a distraction, which I didn't get to use. But it was just, when also doing that, we got a journal entry, which the different journal entries you keep in a sleeve, and they affect the outcome of the story. As you're going through, you'll meet NPCs later on that if you have that journal entry, it changes the way the book handles the dialogue. It's got this big fat book that shows the places that you can move through. It's a choose your own adventure effectively, but also there's an entirely separate book of boss battles, which we didn't even get to use, but we browsed through. If you imagine that the Divinity video game has a lot of stuff in it, when converting it to a board game, it also has a lot of stuff in it. I believe on my Instagram, you can find it, but I will try and remember when this episode goes up to post it on our Instagram as well, or at least in our stories. Our incredible host who was showing us through the game, at one point, Sarah smartly asked her to hold the bottom of the game box up so we could see all the stuff in it and how big it was compared to her. And it was delightfully comical how massive this board game is.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe Nev also said that the game is designed to be 50 hours of total gameplay in 10 to 15 hour adventures, because Larian RPGs as I know them, whether it's Divinity or Baldur's Gate 3, it's not so much your choices matter. It's that your choices have consequences. And
Yes.
The journal pages are great quest markers in terms of noting whether or not you've done a thing or not, whether or not there are consequences to choices made and carry through. It's nice and it's elegant. But also, yeah, there's a big old tome. Like you said, Matt, choose your own adventure, and the use of range from room to room, the way that you could repeat a check a few times, the way that combat was handled in reinforcements, the way that threats and wandering hazards were brought in. I don't want to sit here and break down all of it, but there's a lot of small fiddly bits that all work together very nicely and are well suited to capturing the feeling of the game. And if it wasn't $160 for the game, I would have it at home right now. That's not saying never. That's just saying that's how much it is, and it's worth it.
Agreed. While we have board games on the mind, I do want to shout out the incredible folks at KES. So if you remember, in our Can Video Games Be Translated to Board Games episode, which was possible courtesy of getting press badges to PAX Unplugged last year, we played the Sonic Roll board game. We tested it essentially.
Yeah, had a great time.
Play test, and it was a blast. It hadn't come out yet. Well, now it's out, and KES had a booth at PAX East, and the lovely Lauren, who demoed the game for us and who offered us a press copy, which we unfortunately never were able to make happen, was there. And so I went and chatted with her. Turns out they've listened to the episode multiple times. So if you're still listening, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. But also I mentioned the press copy, and she's like, oh yeah, that it just never ended up working out mailing them out, but we have influencer copies here, just take one off the shelf. And so lo and behold, now Geoff and I have shared custody over a copy of Sonic Roll. It currently lives with me. Thank you again to KES and Lauren for providing that to us. We are excited to play it more, and you can bet your ass that at some point this year we will find a way to probably stream or capture some footage of us playing that board game, because it was a lot of fun. We had a blast playing it with Lauren and Sarah back at PAX Unplugged, and I would like to create some quote unquote content playing it again because it was a lot of fun.
I just want to play it again. If we make content, that's also a bonus.
Yes,
But,
that's fair.
Here we are.
Let's move on to our first Whitethorn game. Sorry, Whitethorn Games. I'm always calling you Whitehorn by accident because my brain erases the T for some reason. There were a lot of games we could see. Jeff mentioned one of them earlier, but the one we ended up choosing because we thought it would be multiplayer in the demo, it ended up not being, was a game called Slime Heroes. It is a action RPG, but with slimes. In a very famous Japanese RPG that will remain nameless in this moment, slimes and other smaller creatures tend to be the lowest of minions. Well, in this game, you take control of one and seek revenge for a thing that happens. I don't even want to really spoil it because it was kind of sad but delightful.
You're fighting for safety and justice.
Pretty much. I made my slime as goofy as possible. I demoed this one and got to play for a while. And we're going to have a chat with Lisa Muir at the end of the episode. But it was a delight to play. It was really brightly colored and felt very cool. And like the neatest thing about it was there was a mechanic where besides having a weapon that you can equip, you also get abilities based on the enemies you fight. You can then mix and match those abilities together to make new abilities. For example, you get a projectile and a whirlwind. If you mix it one way, you shoot a movable, like a whirlwind that moves. Swap it another way, you get a whirlwind of projectiles around you. And it's just really neat. Like there's like 20 something combinations, I think we say in the interview. And it was just a really neat feature to a game that I expected to be kind of just a cute but basic action RPG. I was surprised that this mechanic adds a ton of replayability, I think, because there's just going to be so many combinations.
Yeah, there was a lot about the game. There's a lot of questions that we had that kind of had the answer. We'll have an answer for that at some point, but this is still a very recent announcement, very early in development. It still has a lot of charm to it. And yeah, the power mixing combinations and the fact that what order you put them, what priority you put them causes different things. I'm very intrigued by this. Also noticing a lot of Kirby vibes in the game. One of the things I love about Kirby is it's a game that is straightforward enough to beat, but fiendishly difficult to get absolutely everything. I feel like Slime Heroes might be going the same way, certainly in terms of these power combinations, and I look forward to seeing how they are utilized as the game furthers along in development. Over at Games from Poland, which is a booth that has been at PAX for a long time, that is just a big coming together of a bunch of different studios from Poland to showcase a lot of the projects that they're working on, and is always good for a few surprises. We got to try out the game Heading Out, a sort of racing game RPG visual novel, as it were. It is inspired by sort of the old road movies of the 60s and 70s, that idea of the American highway and the Midwest out west kind of just being a drifter and going somewhere and having the big muscle car and races and everything else. The sorts of things that Need for Speed Underground wanted to be, but this is so much better. It has this undeniable aesthetic to it, very black and white except for road signs and safety hazards, having them pop like that, a little bit of a cell shading kind of feel to it. Between all of the races that happen, you are driving along on the road map and you have to worry about your notoriety and the actions that you take drawing the eyes of the law. Crossing state lines will actually reset some of that because that's how the laws work. And you get to certain stops and places and you have choices that you can make. You got to buy gas. And sometimes whether or not you get that money by taking a bet against somebody or racing someone or just making some strange choices. At the very beginning of the playthrough, you also make some choices about what kind of character you are. Nothing about how you look, but just about why you're out there. What are you driving away from? What are you running from? What are you driving towards? What are you trying to forget? Do you have regrets? And these play up in little ways in the little dialogues that go on throughout and other little design choices like radio broadcasts from various local stations that have just wild characters and strange ideas. And you start picking up reputation on the CB radio and everything else. We only played it for probably about 20 minutes or so. Matt got in a race and we all went for a few, and the races last as long as a song that plays on the radio. I'm excited to see more of the soundtrack as it comes out, to play more of the game, to see how some of the different permutations play out. It also gave me some feelings of like the world that Full Throttle lived in, the LucasArts games. That sort of, there is civilization out there is society out there, but that means nothing to us. It was one that, honestly, I did not know this game existed. Matt scheduled this playtime, and so I'm like, heading out at PAX East. What are we heading at? Oh, it's a game. Right. I had to keep reminding myself that. We got there and blew me away.
I saw the like little preview, like the teaser video for it, and I was just blown away by the aesthetic. So I booked the appointment based on that. I do want to shout out the incredible Tyler Gardner over at Sandbox Strat for making this appointment happen. You can bet your ass that we're going to talk to these developers in the future if we can.
Absolutely.
But even just getting to play the one race and watching Geoff make a lot of the choices, we did universally go ACAB anytime a cop showed up that wanted to race or do something. We just booked it. Didn't even.
They just wanted to make a deal with us. Nah, it'll be fine. Yeah, like I can trust you.
Yeah, it was a blast. And the aesthetic and the style and this kind of cheesy VO, cheesy in a good way, right? Kind of schmaltzy, like it's rebel running from their past kind of machismo that was just really charming.
And it also had just as much in that kind of dripping melodrama. One of the radio broadcasts that actually had sequels to it was a local cooking show where the host was a middle-aged woman going through a divorce and just stopped giving recipes and just started complaining about her divorce. It was incredible.
And the fun thing too is like when you win a race or finish a race, the race doesn't just end and cut away. You kind of drive off as a podcast or a song or something else plays. Usually podcasts because songs are during the race. It kind of fills in the gaps in the world, sort of in a similar way that we talked about Little Lands. Like instead of a racing game where you just go from race to race to race and there's not much there, here there's little narrative beats in between the races, both the beginning and the end. And then even when you're out on the map, you stop to get gas and get challenged to a race by a cop and then speed off, things like that. These choices you make will then affect your infamy and also affect how the world treats you in the future when you meet other things or do other things, which has been really cool. It was really cool to see in the demo.
I could already see the ways that all of the aspects of the game integrate together, where you only have so much money, and those choices that you make, you need to buy things to repair your car if you get it dinged up. You need to get gas in the car if you want to be able to go anywhere. There's not a set prescribed, you do this race, then you do this race. Things come and go. Yeah, cop challenged us to a race and be like, well, you raced me and I'll tell the rest of my boys to ease off your back. And that was an ACAB moment. I went, yeah, I don't believe shit you're saying, man. And I got out of there. I could have gotten into a race and I don't know what the consequences would have been. But I went that way and I made sure to scramble across the state line so I could at least breathe a little easier. But I also was running low on money. So I took the next race that came my way that offered any kind of money to it. So those choices, it wasn't a racing game that was interrupted by a visual novel or the other way around. It was a full narrative experience. When chatting with the dev afterwards, I cited musicals in a way that, yes, musical numbers happen in a show when emotions reach a point or when they reach that idea that this has to happen. And there are action movies that do the same thing where a good fight scene is a natural consequence and tells you something about the people involved. And so this is at its core a racing game, but it's one where the racing supports the story being told. It is a narrative racing game.
I'm really excited for this one. This has big game of the year potential just because of how unexpected it was. And it did win our newly coined Surprise of the Show award because honestly, Geoff and I knew pretty early on that Lucid was going to get the award. And we thought, at least, that a ton of other folks would, and at least a few others did. And so we also wanted to highlight a game that maybe no one else saw, very much in the vein of Slay the Princess that was word of mouth. We wanted to do the similar thing for Heading Out with what little reach we have. And so we did, and I'm glad we did because I think it's something to watch out for and a thing that I know not a lot of our peers got to see. And so hopefully now they'll check out.
And for me, something that Surprise of Show is also for are the games that, a game like Lucid, you watch a trailer, you hear the description, and you go, oh, that's a game for me. I'm going to love that. And you go, and you not only love it, but it's incredible, yada, yada, yada. Cool, game of show, great. heading out, if you described it to me or if you showed me a few screenshots, I'd go, yeah, I'll try it out. It looks neat. But by all of its descriptions and everything, it's something that would have had to win me over. And boy,
Right.
howdy did it. For me, Surprise of Show is a little bit of a flag, a call of, even if this doesn't necessarily sound like your type of game, please check it out. I was pleasantly surprised, and I think you might be too. That's what it is for me.
And I'm glad that we have that. I can see us in the nearish future coming up with other awards to give out at future live events as well. So
As
we
I
are
figure out
definitely
some
gonna work on
3D
that.
printing of trophies.
Yes. But I do have one other game that I saw very briefly. The last game that I saw that we don't have an interview for, but that I just got hands on was, it's funny, I went to play a game that you had recommended that looked kind of like a GBA game, but I never got to it because instead I stopped to play Cricket, Jay's really peculiar game. And what this is a Earthbound inspired kind of young boy and his friends turn-based adventure. But the aesthetics and the animation looks very Nicktoons almost, very expressive. I really liked it. It has turn-based combat. It has timed hits, but the timed hits, it has like a circle kind of eclipse thing where like one circle moves into the other. And as it does, once they're completely encircled, I guess is the right word. If you hit it, you time it, you can block, you can do extra damage, you can get bonuses with your special moves. And it was a quaint little demo. I don't know that I would have gone out of my way to play it if I didn't have some extra time. But yeah, I really liked this game. I thought it was cute. I liked the dialogue. It felt very Hey Arnold inspired, actually, like kids doing stuff. It pulls from inspirations that seem obvious, but like Lucid, wholly felt its own. And so I really dug it.
Well, I do want to ask real quick, Cricket, that was over at PM Studios?
Yes, correct.
Sarah played that at PAX West and had a definite, oh no, they've got me.
Oh, good.
So I'm glad. I didn't know you got to try that one out, so I'm really glad you did. The game in question that I told you to try out but you didn't get to was Pipistrello and the Cursed Yo-Yo.
Right, which has a similar kind of title, which is why I think I stopped at first and realized, oh no, this isn't it. Well, I'll try this.
It's a very cute game. The name, I might be getting the pronunciation of it wrong because it's apparently Italian for bat. And the developers were saying that it took until, I think, Saturday for somebody to figure that out. It certainly wasn't me. But you are a anthropomorphic bat child who really likes yo-yoing, isn't great at it, but is really enthusiastic and is convinced of their greatness in the way that only 11-year-olds can be. And through a series of circumstances, your yo-yo gets taken over by the spirit of your, I believe, crime boss aunt, and you're dealing with all kinds of things. And yeah, it's got a GBA top-down Zelda dungeon crawl kind of style. The palette and the humor of the writing feels very of that GBA time, that sort of brightness, that sort of like quick wit and a little bit of silliness with utter sincerity. And your yo-yo is used for attacking enemies. It's used for hitting faraway switches. It's used for collecting items. And it can, due to its magical nature, detach and return to you. And it can ricochet off of any sort of banked wall, allowing for all kinds of cool tricks and traveling for your yo-yo to do.
I love that.
There's a room pretty early in the dungeon crawl area of the demo that they've got a bunch of like slime enemies or whatever, and some pillars and a couple of those banked corners. And you can tell pretty quickly you're supposed to shoot it down one of those. And the way that it way faster than if you just threw the yo-yo, it bounces several times. It like twists and turns. The string turns a different color and goes through at least half of those enemies. I felt it, and anyone that I brought to the booth playing it had that like, whoa, that was the catch moment. That was the moment of, I was having fun. This was charming. I need to do more now kind of thing. And so it was a fun adventure game. And if it weren't for the fact that I saw it and went, I'm going to love this, it would be a contender for Surprise of Show, which is why I wanted to clarify my criteria for awarding that. It was a fun game, and it's very funny. It got 3 screens. It had a whole wall and everything at the booth, but because of the way that PM Studios was set up and had so many games and maybe a screen per game, and it was a little labyrinthine maze, it still felt like this weird little nook, this little oasis at the convention. And the team from Pocket Trap that are creating the game were super nice, and hopefully we can talk to them at some point in the future when this game gets closer to release.
That's awesome. That sounds like something that I will absolutely get hooked on when it comes out.
Oh
It
yeah,
does
no,
seem
it
like
very much
my
so.
ish, as it were.
It's one of those, a lot of folks I know, the same sort of folks that are like, man, Lucid's really good. Yeah, this is your jam. A few others that I want to shout out real quick that were ones that Sarah got to play that she might talk about more if she were able to be on the episode today. She also tried out Dustborn from Red Thread Games, a adventure kind of action game that has a lot of rhythmic elements, a very cool style to it, has kind of in my brief lookings at that kind of design that Hi-Fi Rush reminds me of, that kind of a little bit technology, very colorful, a little bit, teen, young adults, we're going to figure some stuff out, but there's all kinds of weird darkness in the world kind of thing. Over at the Freedom Games booth, Sarah tried out Pinball Spire, which was a pinball Metroidvania, because if there was a pinball game there, Sarah's going to find it, Sarah's going to play it.
There's nothing more Sarah Moonin than finding the pinball game at a video game convention.
Oh, yeah. I was talking about Peglin with some folks recently and went, yeah, no. If it's got pinball, Arkanoid, or Peggle mechanics, Sarah has left behind a dust cloud shaped like her and has immediately rushed to the game.
Yeah.
So Pinball Spire was absolutely... She was going to come with us to an interview, then found it and said, I'll find you guys later. Stop bothering me.
Yeah.
And then I think the other one that I just want to shout out just as a fun little thing that happened was Mighty Yell Studios was at PAX East, and Matt, you and I ran into Dave Proctor, the head of the studio and former guest of the show who had been on to talk about the big con. He wanted to show us that Mighty Yell is working on a new project, and we can't give too many details about it. Asked very specifically.
But we have seen the thing.
We have seen the thing. I was given permission to say they're working on something that involves dance.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what more I can say on it, but they should be announcing some stuff pretty soon if all goes well. And oh my God, I'm very excited.
Yeah.
I'm happy to drive up hype for this thing. Matt couldn't be there because scheduling stuff and everything didn't work out. And then just schedule things happened where I didn't see Matt face to face for a while. And I didn't even want to commit what this project is to writing, just in case. Until finally, it had been hours and hours. I'm like, okay, no, quick description, here it is. But, it's that level of things. So when that's happening, I'll point to that and go, that's the thing! So looking forward to it.
Yep. We're going to have some additional interviews that didn't really feature a game demo. We spoke with Eka at Mojikin Studios, which recently merged with Toge Studios. And we got to talk with him about being a game producer, being the head of Mojikin Studio, and what it was like to work on A Space for the Unbound, a game I had recently started, have yet to finish, but really loved, and that Sarah played on the show floor and also saw as quickly as I did that the game will ruin you in the best way. And it was a wonderful conversation about what it's like to make games that take place in another country that really are personal to the people developing the game. And then we also chatted with Hayden, who is the social media manager for Cookie Brigade. This is a little outside of video games, but still important to PAX and PAX East. Cookie Brigade is a charity, and we got to chat with Hayden about, how they got started, why they're important, the charity work they do, and how they continue to grow the charity work that they're doing. It was really a lovely chat, and I'm excited for you all to hear that. But Geoff, that's not all we did. We did a bunch of other stuff while we were there too.
Yeah, we went to a bunch of panels as well.
Yeah, so we got to go, of course, again I got to go again. I don't think you actually made it to Video Game Tinder, if I recall correctly.
No, I was exhausted. If they get to do it again, I'm going. It looks like a hell of a time.
But Video Game Tinder 2 happened. A bunch of really cool people, including friends of the show, Eric Van Allen and Ken the Shepherd. They had a star-studded panel with them to decide which video game characters they would date, and it was a delight. As we speak, it is in the Normandy FM feed. They released the audio version of the panel, along with a link to the PDF of all of the Tinder profiles that Eric created for the different characters. You should definitely go give that a listen. I also got to go to story time with Matt Pat, which was just a delightful conversation where Matt kind of just talked about why he loves video games and why he does what he does. Even though he recently retired from being on the channels that he made, he's still doing work behind the scenes and possibly getting into game dev, and kind of just talked about why video games are important and why they affected him and his life with some milestone moments in his life, which was really wonderful. Geoff, you got to be on a panel. Gee, I don't remember us talking previous to the event, you being on a panel. What's up with that?
You're being so coy about this.
I am.
Yeah, I was on the PAX panel show that was hosted by Jenna Stieber, whom I have also been a guest on her podcast, Big Game Hunger. If you haven't listened to that podcast, not even the episode I'm on, it's a great concept. Listen to the podcast.
Yes.
It is creating concepts for video games based off of prompts. It's very fun. Jenna was there as a special guest and was doing the PAX panel show in addition to other panels, one of which I also attended as an audience member. The PAX panel show is just sort of a freewheeling sort of trivia, meant to be very silly, funny kind of game, and didn't fully have a guest list locked down before we all got to PAX. So I had been previously warned, but without a ton of notice, when I got off the train on Wednesday, there was a message from Jenna being like, hey, do you want to be on the show? And I said yes. And it was a hell of a lineup. There was Chris Straub, who has worked with PAX and Penny Arcade and is an incredible horror writer, podcaster extraordinaire. Nintendo fangirl who has been a Nintendo ambassador for, I believe she said 14 years.
Wow.
At this point. Like something incredible like that. And as well as Brooke Bright is the creative director at Jackbox, and also Brian David Gilbert was on the panel.
I wasn't excited about that at all.
And nor was anybody else. He was there originally for the Actually panel, which Jenna also appeared on, that I wanted to go to, but they closed that line off 45 minutes before the panel started. So
Wow.
I didn't get to, and I went over to the Condor where the PAX panel show was a little beforehand just to kind of check in, because this was such a last-minute guest spot kind of thing. I certainly didn't get any emails or anything from PAX or ReadPop or anything of what I was supposed to do. So it was just kind of get there and go, hey, this isn't to be weird. I'm on the next panel. What do I do? And I passed by Brian, as well as Iffy from Dropout and Actually, having a goddamned receiving line of people. So, Matt, you were not alone in the excitement of BDG being there. I had a lot of fun. It was a very ridiculous show. Jenna is an incredible troll of a human being, and I love her to death. There is pictures of the heading to the segment Portmanteaued, which was, I'm going to give you a description of a game that is a combination of two other games and figure out what it is, and it may have broken me. I am a changed human from it. Also, the segments of here's a name, is it an opera character or a FromSoft character, has told me that I really need to start playing more Dark Souls.
Yeah, it was fun as an audience member, especially because I was sitting between Katie Lesperance and Dave Jackson, both who are Dark Souls and FromSoft sickos. The theming of each round, because they did it 3 times, was great. And it was just watching them fire off. No, that's from that. That's from that was just a delight.
The fact that they still spoke to me after the fact means that I didn't embarrass myself too much, or that they're very forgiving people.
Could be both. The panel was a delight to watch, though, and I did get to shake BDG's hand afterwards and tell him how delightful he is, which is kind of all I wanted. So that was wonderful.
He was so tired.
He was so tired, and then had a
I don't blame him.
Yeah, and then he had a receiving line like leaving. Folks wanted photos. You know, it is what it is. He was very gracious and very sweet. So
very much so. And the other of Jenna's panels that I went to was a game debate. What generation has better horror games, millennials or Gen Z?
Interesting.
Yes. Now, the format that Matt, you and I have done on shows like The Great Game Debate that are modeled after classic debating very much broke down just into straight up arguing.
Amazing.
Very fun arguing, but it was still just like a back and forth. And Jenna got to the clear point where it's like, well, this leads into the counterpoints section, but you're doing great. So let's just keep going.
I do want to shout out Brendan Groom's panel, friend of the show and previous Side Quests host. He did a panel called Video Game Cocktail Hour, Sipping Our Favorite Games.
Yes.
Folks might have turned up thinking they were going to drink, which they can't because they can't have food in the panel rooms. They can't control what substances you bring or could put in the substance, blah, blah, blah. Usual con food stuff. So instead, what Brendan did is, along with Jenny Wyndham, Michael Hyam, Kenneth Shepard, Kate Sanchez, and Jesse Vitelli, they hung out together, told Brendan what their favorite game was or a game they wanted a cocktail created around. And Brendan, freeform, created those cocktails. They all tried them. And then they presented on the panel the game, talked about why the game was important, and then the cocktail. Brendan Groom, if you don't know, is one of the hosts of Pass the Controller. And for, I think, at least a year now, it's been a while, at least 6 months, when a new game comes out, AAA or indie, that he's really into, or that maybe he gets a review code for, he creates a cocktail around that game. He's done it most recently for Rebirth and Dragon's Dogma 2 and Infinite Wealth and some others. Really brilliant. Brendan was a bartender for many years, very talented mixologist, on top of being an incredible podcast host, and very handsome.
All these things.
All of these things. But so for this, each panelist picked a game, and then he made the cocktails and talked about it. And the videos, I believe, either will be or as we speak are up on his YouTube channel as well for Pass the Controller. But like, it was really interesting why people picked certain games and then the logic Brendan used and he described to make the cocktails. I could go into great detail, but I believe, if I have to assume correctly, Pass the Controller will have the audio for this in their feed at some point if they don't already. And I think it might have been streamed. I'm not 100% on that. The next panel I'm about to talk about was, but I'm not 100% on the cocktail hour, but definitely I'm almost positive it'll end up in their feed. But even if you just want to see the cocktail videos and a bunch of others, you can go to Pass the Controller on YouTube and watch them. But it was really an incredible idea. I hope Brendan does it again because something of note, also, Kenneth Shepard, like myself, doesn't drink booze. So Brendan's cocktail for Ken was you made like
a shrub?
Yeah, it had no booze in it and still sounded delicious, which was great. As someone who also doesn't drink, I love that idea as well because that's not often done. So that was really wonderful. On Sunday, there was a panel called Between Two Screens. It was a retrospective on the DS that our good friend Jacob McCourt hosted. This is the third in a series of panels he's done. We had Jacob on shortly after the one I did on the GameCube. He's since also done the Game Boy Advance, I believe, at West last year. And now at East this year, he did the DS. And crucially, not only did he do that, but it was streamed, which you could find, I believe, on the VODs on PAX 2 on Twitch, but it's also on PAX's YouTube page if you want to watch it. And then the audio version will be on the Left Behind Game Club feed. Jacob spent the entire weekend with his DSi taking photos of everyone that he then put in the panel slideshow as well.
Oh, I did not know he did that. That's incredible.
It is. It is brilliant. The panels for this were previously mentioned, Brendan Groom and Jenny Wyndham, along with CG Danny B, who recently did a side quest for us, Scott White, who has done many side quests for us, and good friend of the show, Dave Jackson, as well. And it was wonderful. If you haven't watched or listened to any of these panels before, how Jacob does this is the panelists all pick two games, not including Jacob. He's just moderator, but all the panelists pick two games they want to add to the list, explain why they picked those two games. They talk about a little bit of the history of the console, and then the majority of the panel after that is just audience members pitching why games should be on this perfect list of 15 games and having to take another game off and explain why, either defend the game they picked or put down the game they want taken off.
I personally really like that mechanic where it's not just that this deserves to be on the list, it's this deserves to replace that.
And Jacob gives you like 15 seconds to pitch it. There were some pre-written notes app pitches this time, which was pretty neat. People who definitely must have gone to previous panels. But I won't spoil what the definitive 15 games are. However, I will say that it was very funny that after they talk about the 10 games that the panelists chose, there were 11 games on the list. The 11th game was Chrono Trigger, and Jacob pretty much went, this is my panel, and Chrono Trigger has to be on this list. And of course, Chrono Trigger remained on the list. But I was like at first, like for the panel I was on, I had to defend my choices. And then on the GBA panel, I wasn't there, but like I definitely DM'd Jacob's suggestions and defended my stuff. This one, I just sat back. The game that I would have put on the list was already on there, and it wasn't going anywhere. So I had no work to do. I just got to enjoy the panel.
I love that. Did anybody argue for my choice for Retro Game Challenge?
Unfortunately, no.
It never even came up?
Nope, unfortunately.
Philistines all, I'll see you on the battlefield.
There were some very random games that were brought up, like 999, which I didn't even know existed.
That's not random. That's a classic.
I'd never heard of it.
It's part of a trilogy. The Nonary games, it's so good.
Dave Jackson, it was really delightful to see him in particular really go to bat for Rhythm Heaven, which everyone went to bat for. And of course, Picross 3D doing the Lord's work, which I know is one of your favorites.
Yeah, I knew Dave was going to be there and was fighting the good fight. So I felt safe there. Glad to hear it.
But it was a wonderful panel. And if you want to check it out, like I said, you can go to the Left Behind Game Club's podcast feed, or you can go to PAX's YouTube channel, and I know it's up there. Folks have watched it. It was wonderful. Before we start to wrap up, I do want to also just shout out a ton of friends that we saw. I can't name every individual name, but I do have to shout out the previously mentioned Scott White and Matthew Finneman, who have been involved on some level with all the stuff we did this weekend, because they were also my PAX roomies, and I cherish them. We got to see a ton of folks who I adore, met a ton of new people as well, got to reconnect with old friends, got to reestablish relationships. I also, the only other thing I did that I forgot to mention is Remap Radio, formerly Waypoint Radio, a podcast I've mentioned on this podcast many a time, had their first in-person meetup since becoming Remap. So Janet couldn't make it. Janet Garcia was at GC, but Kato, Patrick Klepek, and Rob Zachney were all there. I got to meet all of them, hang for a bit, and chat. They're all wonderful. I got to put out, if you saw on my Twitter, a very touching tweet as I got a selfie with Patrick, because he has meant a lot to my progression in the game space and the inspiration for parts of the show for sure. Yeah. And so that was really nice to get to do. They were all lovely. Got to share stories, and Patrick talked about his kids a lot, which is unsurprising to anyone who follows everything that he does. But it was wonderful. It was really a low-key thing. We all hung out at the bar in the West End and just kind of shot the shit. It's funny, at one point I'm chatting with Patrick and I feel someone kind of like grab my side. It was Moises, who then came up behind me, put his arm around me, because Moises is familiar with those folks too. He was on it back on the show when I believe it was still Waypoint. It was just a delightful hang, and I like those kinds of meetups, and I'm glad that I got to do it. There is literally no way Geoff and I can shout out everyone that we saw that weekend, but know that if you're hearing this and we did hang out, we love you very much and we had a blast.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody that I saw over the weekend where it was bad, I regretted it, or that my one regret is I didn't get to hang out with you more. So I guess that means we all got to keep going to PAXs and keep covering cool games and making really silly experiences. And the Between Two Screens is already up on PAX's YouTube page, so I need to watch this because I expect to be frothing at the mouth, and I can't wait.
If you have any questions about PAX, please write us. We would love to answer your questions about stuff that maybe, or if you were at PAX, we got to see a bunch of indie creators as well, other folks in the space like us, like, of course, the incredible Nick and Will from Friday Night Gamecast. You can expect some crossover content this year. Nick and I got to talking. Nick has never played Chrono Trigger, and I've still never played Gen 2 and have Heart Gold. So we are going to do a DS swap, and we're going to share stories. And so we may incorporate that into a larger episode, but for sure there will be some chat of that, and then some other stuff that we had ideas for while hanging. But if at any point you came to say hi to me, I ran into Roger Reichard and Dan O'Mac, and God, the list is endless. I can't even shout everyone out, but we had a blast. We're definitely going to do this again. Hope to see y'all at West. We'll see how it goes, but we definitely will be trying to do more and more of this as time goes on. But if you were at PAX East and we didn't see you, but you did see some cool stuff you want to share, please do. We want to share stories about cons like this because it's how we discover new things, and it's always a blast to get to do that.
Yeah, please. If you did go to PAX East this year, if there were games that you saw that we didn't even mention or see, please let us know about them. Just because we didn't see them doesn't mean we didn't want to know about them. There's so many games out there just in that one room over a few days. working together and sharing recommendations is how we find those new experiences, which is why it's so crucial, certainly to me, that we have these kind of conversations and reach out to each other like this. So please let us know. Get in touch with us. There's so many great ways to reach us. We are Fun and Games Pod across all social media that we are a part of as of this episode: Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Tumblr. You can email us at funandgamespod@gmail.com. You can see all of the things that we're up to and get up-to-date things on our Patreon, patreon.com/funandgamespod. If you do not have to pledge any money to be a part of the Patreon, we have a free tier, but we are ever so grateful, especially after PAX, for those that have had the means and the desire to financially support us. If the interviews sound better than they ever have before, thank you, patrons. And we especially want to shout out those on the high scoreboard. And today the high scoreboard is Alex Lavelle, Case Aiken, Daniel Needon, Luke Lewis, Roger Reichart, Alejandro Alves, Curly Bright, Film It Yourself, Patrick Edwards, Robert Prine, and Sean Bowen. Thank you so much for your support. Please enter your initials. The floor closes in 30 seconds. You can also visit certainpov.com and find not only all sorts of other fantastic Certain POV podcasts, but also a permanent invite link to our Discord server where a lot of these conversations continue. And I know I'm going to be hyping up every game that I saw when news drops of it in the coming days.
Yes. Also, for all of that stuff and more, you can find links in the show notes. We also have links to both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. A rating and a review goes a long way. Seriously, if you are listening and you have not done either of those, either a rating on Spotify or a rating and review on Apple Pod, please do it. It helps us reach new audiences. And when folks start searching PAX East 2024 coverage, they can find our show and many others that also have done some really great coverage. I'm really grateful. Geoff coyly alluded to it, but we got new handheld mics and a recorder for the field so we could record better interviews for all of you. So thank you for that. The Patreon directly allowed us to do that. That money allowed us to upgrade our gear. So thank you for that. We literally could not do this without you.
Absolutely. We've been saying that the support from the Patreon goes towards making all of this a little better, a little more, a little whatever else. And this is one of the big tangible ones and was kind of a big ticket item we were looking at. So as the person who lugged it around and is editing all of this stuff and was the AV nerd for the whole weekend, I was so excited for y'all to get to hear the fruits of that and hear these interviews and get a little more of an intimate look into our PAX weekend. Thank you so much, whether you did support on the Patreon or you're just listening, you're here. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do this without you. This is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
And enjoyed the interviews.
All right, so Geoff and I are here at PAX East 2024, our first interview of the show, and we are chatting with Ben Qualo, the founder and CEO of Midwest Games. Ben, thanks for joining us.
I was so happy to be here.
We just played Rah Rah Boom, your beat-em-up, side-scrolling shooter, like it's a beat-em-up and a shooter.
Sci-fi shooter.
With cheerleaders.
Yeah, with ninja cheerleaders trying to save the world from AI, which is well-timed.
Well-timed. Yes.
Absolutely.
Are you saying that's topical? I don't quite understand.
I heard it once or twice at GDC and now at PAX. There's a couple things going on.
Sometimes, it feels prescient, I suppose.
Yeah, a little bit.
In the future.
So Geoff and I just got to play it. It was great. We're both old school beat 'em up fans. Talk to us a little bit about why Rah Rah Boom, what you loved about it, and why you brought it on, and you're publishing it, right?
Yeah, we're publishing it. So I left Netflix in May of 2023 to build this company. I had to come off of building Netflix games from the ground up and trying to build my own publisher. And I think it was the first event after I left. I was at a GamesBeat event and I met Chris Bergman, the founder of Guiley Games, he goes, I got this game. And I'm like, okay, cool. And this first game presented was Rah Rah Boom. And I was like, oh. So it was a really just exciting moment thinking about how do we diversify the industry? How do we better support underrepresented, undersupported, overlooked developers? And the fact that this game has 4 female protagonists it really challenges some of the norms of traditional beat 'em up style games. And so I was super excited about that. We took a bet. That was our first game signed, and we're so happy to have it as part of what we're doing at Midwest Games.
Fantastic. And I mean, yes, you are Midwest Games, and from what I heard, a lot of you are based out of the Ohio area.
Talent is in the region, but being undersupported. You know, you think back to the last great publisher was Midway. They went out of business almost exactly 15 years ago.
Wow.
And so that pillar collapsed, and
Mm-hmm.
the whole industry collapsed in the Midwest. And so I wanted to bring opportunities to where talent is. You know, as of like 2020, 67% of the industry was in California, Washington, and Texas, you know, according to an ESA study. But with the migration patterns shifting in 2021, 2022, and beyond to go away from some of the traditional hubs and back to where people were from, or back to or to affordable places, my bet is there's talent there that we can find and help elevate their games, because having a publisher increases your chance of success tremendously, because you have a partner that's handling all of the marketing, QA, localization, everything around a game that is needed to help elevate it, help bring it to success. And the Midwest didn't have anybody. So that was my bet. And then we're also taking bets outside of that in places like Mexico. We're talking to a studio in Northern Ireland. We have a studio in New Mexico, like places that are not traditional hubs but have talent. Like the old model's shifting and people aren't keeping up with where the industry is going, and adjusting quick enough and supporting studios, supporting individuals in the industry. And so I'm leaning into that, and I'm saying, hey, we can do better. And we are trying to do that with Midwest Games.
I agree with the current climate of the games industry. I feel more than ever, games being delisted now and everything else, knowing a company's mission and aligning with that, everybody knows going in what we're heading for.
Yeah, and being Midwest, there's something about being. People have heard Midwest nice,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like those kinds of things. And so that's why we, even as a company, I went through all the naming exercise. What do we name this thing?
Mhm.
And I'm like, we're overcomplicating this. Like, who are we? What do we represent? How do we act?
Yeah.
And how do we treat other people? And like, Midwest was such a great, simple message. Yes, generic in a way, but it also explains a lot of things immediately so people can understand it. And that matters to people. With 14,000 games coming out on Steam, we want to be able to say, hey, we combed through a lot of games,
Mhm.
and we love these ones. And it's not always because we expect giant sales. Like one of the big pieces that I believe in this industry that we can get better at is we don't have to just be hit driven. There is a sustainability piece when, if you spend at the right levels and do the work to get things so that they're profitable, it gives studios chances to continue to develop. And we know statistically, studios that stay together, develop over time across multiple titles, end up having bigger successes over time.
Sustainability.
And we want to, we even design our deals to be long-term focused so that the studio wants to work with us long-term, because we know if we build that long-term relationship, we're more likely to find that big hit that studio puts out eventually. But you have to be long-term focused, not just about short-term gain.
Well, and there's something about the indie scene and this camaraderie, this we're in this together kind of mentality.
We can all win together. Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
like what I love about what I do now is when a game's not right for us,
Mhm.
I go, oh, but you should talk to this indie publisher. I
Right.
love them. I will advocate for them, and then I will connect them to that other publisher. It's not me losing out on something.
Right.
It's I want them to succeed, and I know they have a better chance of success if they have a partner to be able to do it. And so we're actually like collaborating together where we can easily pass it off, where it's like, oh, sorry, like this is a game that costs over $1 million, which we do sub $1 million games.
Nice.
But we have like 2 other publishers that we know are right in that range, looking at games right now, and we can pass it off, and we can all win in those situations. Whereas AAA gets really competitive, where it's like one or another, because they're trying to, build this like walled garden,
Yeah.
and keep people where they are. Whereas on indie, we're like, no, go play other indie games,
Yeah.
play ours as well, but we want you just to play a lot of awesome games by awesome developers, because that gives them a chance to create long-term success.
Yeah, it's really a great scene, and I'm so glad that we even get to be a small part of it.
Yeah.
To bring it back to Rah Rah Boom, a blast to play. I know that you guys don't have a release date yet. You'd love to get it out this year, as many folks say, and that you're targeting Steam, but console is also possible.
Yes.
We tried out Rah Rah Boom, but Midwest Games is also demoing a few other games here at PAX East. I wish we had time to play everything, but could you tell us in brief some of the other things that Midwest is showcasing right now so people know what to look for?
Yeah, so Duck Paradox, we just recently put out
Mm-hmm.
about, a week ago?
Congrats.
And so that's in early access right now and available for people to play. So we're showing that game off. It's an incredible...
It's the side-scroller kind of Metroidvania style.
Yeah, it's a precision platformer all around this woman named Dr. Paradox
Mm-hmm.
that accidentally sends her duck into a multiverse and ultimately has to go in after her duck to try and save it, but then encounters a lot of evil versions of her duck, in this vein of like Loki and many different versions and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just an incredibly fun roguelike adventure, and it's so difficult. I like to call it Duck Souls because it's so difficult.
That's very good.
But it is an incredibly fun game available right now. We're showing off Lullaby of Life, which is like an ambiotic puzzle-solving game from a studio in Mexico.
Nice.
And so that one has a demo. And then Dark Sky as well, a studio in New Mexico. We're super excited about. It's an RPG. It gives me like Final Fantasy, like early Final Fantasy kind of feel to it.
Incredible,
But it got some deck builder elements. And it's not roguelike. Like one of the very few, like not roguelike
deck builders.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it has an incredible feel, incredible team that came from Riot and Wargaming to build this studio in New Mexico. Again, we're not normally other places. Other people build things.
Well, Ben, thank you for chatting with us. This was wonderful. Tell folks where they can find you online, find Midwest Games online, give your plugs, and then we'll have you do our sign-off.
Yeah, so you can find us, pretty much search Midwest Games on any social. But MidwestGames.com is our website. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ben Qualo. I'm also on Twitter at more of my unfiltered thoughts. I do a lot more on LinkedIn, a ton of stuff on LinkedIn, probably too much on LinkedIn. But it's a lot of fun. And I'm the kind of CEO that I'm one of the few that's willing to just speak my mind about
important
what it
right
is.
now.
So if you want to hear what I think about the industry, what I think we can do better, I'm always sharing that.
We are chatting with Eka from a multitude of things, but you are the co-founder of Mojiken Studios.
Yes.
And you guys also made, of course, A Space for the Unbound, an incredible game. So I played the first hour of the game, and when the inciting incident happens, I looked at the screen, and then I went to Twitter and went, "This game's gonna break my heart, isn't it?" Even in the opening half hour, it's such a powerful story. I just want to know how a story like this comes together.
Initially, we just want to, document a lot of things that we love from our hometown in Surabaya, basically. And also, we want to tell story of our own story, personal story from our team member. So yeah, if you play the game, a lot of a bit of story from our team as well.
For a game that can be sad and emotional, there's also a lot of comedy in the winking at the camera, almost, so to speak, with the game mechanics, the Red Book, stuff like that. Does that just come from your love of games and growing up playing games?
So we take a lot of inspirations from other games also. So like Psychonauts, if you know,
Sure.
So
Definitely.
Psychonauts, and then we also take inspirations from movie like Inception.
Sure.
Yeah. Actually, we came out with the Magic Red Book. It's later on the development cycle. So before that, we kind of struggling to how to convey the story of the game. After we found that recipe, the Red Magic Book, on how we have to go inside some other's mind and try to fix things, it all comes full circle from there. Yeah.
I love the aesthetic, of course. Like us, I'm sure, growing up playing a lot of 16-bit, 8-bit, 16-bit games.
We are fascinated by pixel art specifically because in pixel art, you can draw a lot of things, but with we call that some kind of imperfections. So there are super high definition detail of the character or the environment or all of the assets, the visual assets. But when you play the game, like the pixel art game, you kind of like fill in the details of
Yeah,
the,
you fill in the gaps. It's very
Yes.
much like kind of the way that old graphics used to be built
Yeah.
around CRT images, and that's why they look so odd when you put them on HD.
Yeah. So that's what fascinates us about the pixel art. So that's why we choose to use that art style.
Makes
As
sense.
a game producer for this game and a co-founder for the studio, what is it like to produce a game like this? Like, what is your role in making sure that this game is a success, specifically as a producer?
Specifically the budgeting.
Yeah, sure.
The budgeting and also, but I think I kind of screwed that up because this game takes 7 years to make. So, so like budgeting and also like scheduling,
Of course.
but also how to maintain sanity between our
Yes.
team members because
if it takes 7 years, but you're sane at the end of it, I
Yeah.
think that's the greater victory.
yeah.
This game has found quite a lot of success, especially amongst people who love indie games. Did you have an expectation for what the response would be to it?
No, to be honest, no. We don't have like preconception about how this game will gonna succeed or how people were gonna receive. All the things like the environment, it's all about Indonesian, right?
Right.
It's oozing like this Southeast Asian culture,
Right.
and then we kind of like hesitate at first to like telling this story about our country because how all the peoples in the world were gonna relate to this. But yeah,
But I found that like the response, like a lot of people relate to the smaller stories, the bigger story,
Yeah.
because I think it transcends just the country it's from or the origin, because we all have these moments of doubt or sadness, and I think that really translates regardless of the medium.
And I think in telling a story that comes from a place of great truth, as far as telling of home, as it were,
Yeah.
rather than trying to reach out to the target audience, you present a truth, and people will do the work to find their truth within it. And I think that's a good formula.
I think because a lot of the story in the game, it's also a personal story for us. So it adds to the genuineness of the game.
In connection with Togi and like all of these, I can't tell if it's intentional or not that these games all seem to have a vibe, right? Like I love the Coffee Talk games, huge fan of those.
Oh, yeah.
All of them seem to have this personal touch, right? Told from a place of truth, not just about the US and American story. Like it's very personal to these places you're all from. Was that always the intention from the beginning, or did you guys just kind of find each other and build this kind of community of creators?
Basically, we are from the same country, but
Yeah.
from different city. We found like similar like spirit. I think like in this spirit about how we approach our game, because there are a lot of like Indonesian game dev company,
Oh, yeah.
but all of them more oriented on like I don't know, like B2B one services,
Yeah.
and also like mobile games. So like Toge and Mojiken, how we approach in terms of like game design and also like creative decisions. So I think that's how we finding each other and connect. So they publish our games, and then if you know the story, last November we merged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about being the co-founder of Mojiken, obviously you have a deep love of video games. Was that ever the plan to like create a studio and make games, or did you just kind of find your way there naturally from loving games?
Well, I don't plan to like make a game studio. I just want to make games.
Right.
I think
Yeah, sure.
No, those are different
Well,
things. Absolutely.
yeah, everybody like indie scene basically just want to make games, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But at first, I'm an illustrator basically. Actually, like 90% of Mojiken crew consists of illustrator.
Wow.
Back in the day when we
Yeah. But
starting up. At first, we just want to make like an illustration studio, but we realized that there are so many illustration studio in Indonesia already with like higher budgets, higher
the resources and everything that they have.
Yeah, we're just thinking like, how do we make an impact ourselves? So we want to make our own IP. Back then, there wasn't so many like studio.
Right. Yeah.
And we started on like Flash back then.
Oh, man, that takes me back.
Yeah. We sell like Flash
Flash games. Yeah. Rest in peace.
So A Space for the Unbound especially it was directed by my colleague named Dimas.
Uh-huh.
he's very inspired by like anime and manga stuff,
Yeah.
especially like Makoto Shinkai
Mm-hmm.
movie. He's like anime and manga fans, and he also like to draw something that is very emotional.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think that you're going to explore a similar space, or do you want to try something completely different? Like, what's the mentality as you move on to what you want to do next?
Okay, so in Majiken, every crew has chance to direct their own games.
Oh wow.
Wonderful.
So A Space for the Unbound was directed by Dimas.
Right.
We also have games, our past games called When the Past Was Around. It was directed by my colleague Rena. The next one, actually we have released our like proof of concept.
Uh-huh.
The game was called Test Test Test.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a proof of concept for our next game. It was directed by my friend Elwin. There will be like slightly different, like direction about how the visual style and also like the game design
Right, yeah.
philosophy.
That's amazing. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time. I'm very serious when I say games that your studio, like, I think there's just this love of video games inherent in your games. And the fact that you guys have combined forces now and are really just going to move forward together, I think just is bringing something to the indie space that we don't always get to see. There are a lot of really great emotional games, especially in the indie space, but there's something so deeply personal about stuff like A Space for the Unbound and Coffee Talk and all the others that everyone's pulling from somewhere within them, but there's something beautiful about seeing truly personal stories come to life in video games.
Thank you, thank you.
And thank you.
We are returning to the show, but on location, Jaren Moore. Jaren, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We just finished playing Wizardom from Apogee.
Yes. And so we had you on, oh my God, 3 years ago now to talk about broad Apogee stuff. And now you're going to give us the lowdown on Wizardom because the creator of the game had a lovely little baby and is not at the show. But we're excited to chat with you again. And like we just played this game. So why Wizardom? It's a boomer shooter, but you're playing as a wizard. It's just got this aesthetic that feels familiar, that feels so different. Like, what attracted you guys to like wanting to publish a game like this?
Well, Primoz, the lead developer, he's just such a huge fan of the original Wolfenstein, Doom, Quake, like growing up with Duke Nukem 3D.
Yeah,
He and I are around the same age.
Right.
I grew up with those as well. And when he started partnering with us as a developer at Apogee, he's responsible for our remasters of Crystal Caves,
Yeah.
Monster Bash, and Secret Agent. In order to do that, you have to love it.
Right.
Absolutely.
And he absolutely does, and he gets Apogee. And so when he started making Wizardom, it was an homage to Doom, to Wolfenstein 3D, to Blakestone 3D, to Hexen, Heretic, and Ultima Underworld. He presented this to us. We knew he was working on it in the background, but when it came time to actually present it and kind of shop it around, it was just an instant sell for us. I mean, he's such a great developer, and he knows his stuff. He knows what he likes. He's really making this game for himself.
And you guys just happen to also get to enjoy it along the way.
And it's the same kind of passion that we identified in Sam Preble on Turbo
Right.
Overkill.
Right, yeah.
Sam made that game for himself. Like, it's the kind of game he wanted to, like, his dream game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what Primoz is doing. And, of course, this is very different than Turbo.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so.
And a signature sort of thing with Primoz games, and his studio is called Emberheart, a signature Emberheart thing, which carried over to our remakes, was having level editors.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so you've got a full-fledged level maker in Wizardom, and you can upload and download and share and participate in level game jams online. And
That's awesome.
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, before we started recording, we were talking about this, and I think we hit upon like it's something between the Doom WOD community and Dungeon Masters creating your own dungeon. So it's a perfect marriage.
The tools are just, they're so much more accessible now.
Yes.
To have a consumer-facing level editor that people can just jump in and create their own levels, like Primoz, like he wants to encourage that. He loves enabling people's creative fires, so
Yeah, no matter what, it's engaging with the game, it's engaging with the world and with the mechanics. So why wouldn't you want that?
I want to talk a little bit about the music because you were saying some interesting things about the sound design, and I know you were helping sound
the
related
soundtrack.
stuff with the soundtrack and stuff. The music isn't just like an 8-bit soundtrack. Like there's so much more to this.
the tendency for these kinds of games is to kind of, like, for a boomer shooter is either to have like metal or MIDI.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
what we've done is we've kind of taken the sort of the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter throw in a little John Williams magic, and we're working with our composer Tim Stoney,
Yeah.
who also wrote quite a bit of music on Turbo Overkill.
Very
And
nice.
he's shifted gears.
Yeah, it's a very different soundtrack.
I was like, those are not even slightly
The
similar.
range.
Completely shifted gears from kind of an EDM beat driven synth wave soundtrack to something very it's I would dare say it's quite masterful. It's gorgeously orchestrated. There's a single available on Spotify and Apple Music, and it's called the Wizardom Suite.
Amazing.
And
Oh
it's
my
about a
gosh.
7-minute piece that's just this sprawling, epic, like bombastic, adventurous piece that kind of summarizes everything that we're going to be exploring in the music of the game.
The gameplay, like we said earlier, is very Doom-like, very Wolfenstein-like. But what I love is the nuance of it makes you feel. You don't feel like Doom guy. You don't feel like BJ Blazkowicz. Like this character feels different from the magical mace attacks to the fire ring. Have to be a load more weapons.
Yeah, there's going to be quite a few weapons,
Mhm.
quite a few spells. You're actually going to have, I believe, 2 more different playable characters.
Ooh, cool.
Oh,
all right.
all
So
right.
different character types.
Amazing.
Which will have different attributes. So it's quite a bit of depth to it, how you choose to play.
And you'd mentioned before we started recording that it's going to be episodic, that the first episode is available in early access, and that the other ones are coming.
And we're continually folding in features as we progress in delivering the episodes.
Yeah.
That fold back into the first episode.
Oh, amazing. So it's not just new features in each episode. It's going to be retroactive through all 3.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, yeah, it's all releasing episodically now, but at some point, someone later is going to find it all at once. It makes sense for it to be a nice experience the whole way through.
But the thing that Primaz and we want to make sure is that when we do release an episode, the systems that are there are still fun. It's
Yeah.
a product worth paying for. You may be seeing it grow as it nears completion, but you're not getting an unfinished product.
No.
Releasing episodically is intended to create anticipation.
Yeah. Of
course.
And allow you to participate early, because Primaz is listening to comments. He's taking feedback into consideration. He's constantly reviewing things and refining kind of how he develops the game based on, the response.
Nice.
I mean, you've done episodic before, as I recall. Turbo Overkill also wasn't that like early access
Yep.
and episodic as well. And I didn't finish that and feel like, oh, I only played part of a game. It had an arc. It felt
It's the old shareware episodes of Doom and of
Right.
all those other games of the time where you got it a bit at a time. And some of that was fiscal practicality. Some of that was because that's as much as we could fit on a floppy disk that we put with a magazine or what. But it keeps people excited and they feel like complete experiences.
yeah.
It's something Scott and I like to kind of refer to as responsive development.
I like that.
It's kind of become a part of the new makeup of sort of what Apogee's about.
There's this kind of oeuvre of kind of personal dream and like dream games you've mentioned several times to us.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I have to feel like that's palpable when you meet these developers, especially these one-man teams, quote-unquote one-man teams, because they're bringing something so personal to them. It must also make you guys get invested, right? Because you can see that kind of passion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Primaz was a one-man team
Yeah.
Right.
before we brought on his brother, who is a very capable level designer and programmer. So Tomaz is now working with his brother Primaz.
That's amazing.
And we added one of our own internal programmers to the team now as well to bolster that game.
You brought on a composer. You brought on.
We brought on one of our internal composers, and then we've also got another producer on there who's doing level design. He was actually the designer for Wrath.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
So Kill Pixel is with us at Apogee now. So
Amazing. That's
Very
awesome.
nice. Very nice.
But like, you must be. I'm just imagine like, because you guys kind of pick and choose who you want to work with, you look for something very specific.
there needs to be a passion behind it.
Right, of
And,
course.
we want to make sure that when we partner with the developer, they're not going to burn out on their own project.
Right.
We like to be very clear about timelines. We like to understand the roadmap. When it comes to early access, we don't like for our projects to linger in early access,
Right,
of course.
indefinitively.
Mhm.
We make sure that there is definitely most of the time like a 6-month plan.
Yeah.
Love
we don't
that.
want a game to just be out there for 2 or 3 years with no end in sight.
Piece of abandonware that's you can sort of pick at. It's like, no, it's alive. Is it though?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. No. And the landscape is strewn with those, and there's no reason to be so.
Exactly.
The last thing I want to ask you personally is, so you guys have a diverse type of genre and like experience. If you could pick the next game that Apogee made, just out of the ether, what kind of game would you want to make?
We're already making it. It's called Elements.
Oh, okay.
It's
All
a single
right.
player, but it's also a co-op game.
Mhm.
It's very much inspired by like Zelda and Breath of the Wild.
Love
It's
that.
got some crafting and sort of Minecraft sort of elements going on, but it's very rich in lore. One of my mentors in Hollywood, his name's Tab Murphy. He's an Academy Award nominated screenwriter, and we're working directly with him to craft the story for this game. It's an honor to get to work with all of our guys just to create new worlds and places to explore and stories to experience.
It's great to facilitate dreams. That's a wonderful thing.
Jaron, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, of
This
course.
was wonderful.
Thank
It's
you.
great to reunite and to talk about, like, the last time we chatted, Apogee was just starting to kind of rev up this new wave of like what they were going to do. And now 3 or 4 years later, you guys are in full swing, bringing on so many cool projects. It's just cool to see something from my childhood come back. And in this way that I'm like, that's the dream. Like, we get to live it together.
Yeah, no. Well, thank you guys for being a part of it, and I mean,
course.
we're really excited about everything coming down the pipeline. We do hope you go take a look at Questmaster.
We
and-
will, yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that's on the docket. We got
And we are so excited to talk to Ethan Stern about all things Atari. Ethan, thank you for joining
Yeah,
us.
my pleasure. I mean, it's great to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we were saying earlier, you guys are part of Atari lore in a way, so
The best sentence ever said about our podcast ever is that. Folks might remember the harrowing story of a certain arcade cabinet from PAX West, and we're coming full circle talking about a ton of Atari stuff, and like, you guys have been really busy and have a ton of stuff to show here, including some mini consoles that are making some people's dreams come true. Was that always something that you guys wanted to do, is like lean into what, Nintendo of course did their classic consoles and the
Yeah.
Genesis did one. Was that always something you guys wanted to do? Or is it something that you were kind of inspired to do as you saw the market shift?
yeah. I mean, I think for us at Atari, we have kind of interest in reaching forward in creating like new games, like Lunar Lander Beyond coming out. And Quam 2 just came out. These are new games for like a modern audience, but we also try to do a lot to reaching back towards our core community of collectors and people who love Atari for what we did in the 80s and the 90s. And so the 2600 Plus that we launched last year was kind of a flagship product for those collectors, people who like had cartridges and wanted to be able to play them on like a modern TV. We're relying on old controllers that maybe didn't work as well anymore. We made new ones that work, the same pin structure for that old hardware as a tool to like allow those collectors to be able to play their games. In addition to making some new things for that hardware, making new cartridges. This year, the 400 Mini, it's less of a home run swing as we were doing with the 2600 Plus, and more, again, further for that collector's market. So the 8-bit community around Atari is not as famous as the 2600, but still had some really great games. And so it's a micro console that has 20 games built into it already. It is running on emulating off the tech. So if you wanted to sideload any 8-bit game from that era, you could load it onto the hardware and actually play it. So it can act as that preservation product for those people who loved that era of Atari. And as much as we'd love to like put every 8-bit game onto new plastic and like sell that, and that would be great. We understand that the community like uses emulators and like has collections on their own. So it's oftentimes it's about providing the community with the tools to be able to like play the games that they want to play and to preserve those games as well.
And you've had some excellent releases over the past few years of sort of either obscure or more forgotten titles, like when Saboteur came out.
Oh yeah. Well, Saboteur and Aqua Adventure, which we were selling at PAX West, or actually never came out.
That's what it was.
So,
it was
Saboteur
unfinished.
was like an unfinished sequel to the Yars franchise, and then Aqua Adventure was a game that had never gotten finished. And we have a very interesting hardware team who is like, again, like it's all about celebrating that history. And so they went back, found that we had these games in the vault, and we're like, let's finish these games and get them out into the world. And so that's what those titles were.
I mean, however they did at the time, or for whatever reason that an unfinished game wasn't finished, doesn't mean it was an unworthy game necessarily. And it's wonderful that Atari's giving it its time in the sun.
And the collector, those are the special gems that the collector community really wants to have. Like, for the collector community, it's not always about just playing the new hot game. It's about like the story behind it. Like,
Yes.
why were these games like, who were these games like made by? So that's kind of a big part of it.
Well, and that's something I want to jump on, actually, talking about preserving history. You guys did something pretty special with Llamasoft. this idea of the video game documentary, not only just preserving games and giving access to games, but giving the game's history too, which seems really important to Atari, as like living that history and being able to bring it back to life so people can experience who missed it before or reminisce about it, like kind of for everyone.
So Llamasoft was developed and published by Digital Eclipse, who also was the studio who developed Atari 50 for us, which was a flagship title for us, again, like last year. Their approach to these collections is so special because they're almost like museum exhibits or they're documentaries. We were submitting the game to awards for story because we think of them as like the first non-fiction games.
Right.
Yes.
What they do, we think is so incredibly special. And like the Atari 50 being a very successful title for us, we wanted to see more of those made. And not just telling Atari's history, like telling history of like other creators and other games.
Geoff and I often have, and especially in the last year or so, been talking about preservation and the history of games. And I think, like, I grew up playing a 2600. You know, I still remember Mousetrap, the worst Pac-Man clone ever, that I loved. Like, it is a game that controls strangely, has weird mechanics, but I love it because it was part of my childhood.
Yeah.
And I think that's so key to Atari. And yet you are also, like we just talked about, making sequels and new games.
Yeah.
Based on beloved franchises. Like Lunar Lander is having this huge moment right now. And I mean, Lunar Lander is one of my favorite games. Am I good at it? Absolutely not.
We've been working on a remake of Lunar Lander for quite some time now with a developer out of Colombia called Dreams Uncorporated. Dreams did a game called Chris Tales before, which was like an RPG.
Yes.
Really
Which was really cool. We liked that, the visual style, their approach. They have a very illustrative style, so we thought that they were a cool team to work with on this title. So they've been working on it for like almost 2 years now.
Wow.
And we're ready to launch it next week. It's a ton of fun. And it like takes the simple concept of a gravity flyer that kind of Lunar Lander is, where you're just using thrusters to move this spaceship around. And we add more roguelike features and power-ups and a lot of other things to sort of upgrade that experience into a modern video game. In addition to Digital Eclipse, you know, we also had a studio called Night Dive Studios join Atari.
Yeah.
And Night Dive specializes in first-person shooters, especially from the like 90s era, PC era stuff. They just put out Dark Forces, the like Doom-esque
Star
Wars game.
Yeah.
And I was talking with them last week, and it's crazy. You go back and play those games, in your mind, especially like old N64 games. You go back in your mind, you're like, oh yeah, it was played like this. It was so clean. I knew how to like 360 no scope everybody, but it was not. It does not feel that way anymore.
Wow.
And they put so much magic behind like making it feel like the way you remember it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like it's a newly created game. It feels like your memory, but there's a lot of under the hood polish that they do on those titles.
Yeah, and I mean,
And it takes that to really like create that experience for people.
it does, and I think it's really brilliant. It's why it's frustrating when certain companies port stuff and don't put any of that in, right? Like you bring a game over from the N64 and don't add dual analog support, things like that. And you're right, the games that put that stuff under the hood, and like if you had never played it before, you'd never know.
Right.
But someone who did play it go, oh, this feels great. Did it always feel this good? Like, I love that kind of blurring the line between how it was and how it is to make it live up to its reputation almost.
Yeah, so we're kind of talking about like two different techniques of how we're kind of dealing preservation. So there's like that under the hood polish, and then kind of the context that we provide through games like Atari 50 or Llamasoft, where like we were saying earlier, it's like, why this game, right? Like there's so many times we play video games and it's like, why? Like why is this game important? And so creating that context of like, where does this live in the history of video games? What did this inspire? What was inspired by this? Like these are all helpful in creating like the reason why when you play that game, you understand what it is as a kind of a piece of art in a way. I should also like reiterate, like this is really the brainchild of Digital Eclipse. Like this is Digital Eclipse's like passion as a studio and what they do. Chris Kohler, who is on their team, is sort of a directorial sort of person in this space. He's the one who's like really helping to write these narratives alongside the creators. So as much as I'd love to, as Atari, take credit for that stuff, we're really gushing about what they do as a studio, which is amazing.
Being a facilitator is no slouch and is no small thing because we see how few companies partake in that kind of thing as well. So
What we're seeing too is like from the industry, more companies are interested in that. There's a lot of companies that want to tell their story. In addition to selling more of their old catalog, I mean that might be a motivator for it, but like it is a cool, important way to like look at some of these other stories. There are so many stories in the space to tell.
I mean, if that's the motivator that gets more companies doing it, then I think everybody benefits.
Yeah.
Why
I
not?
agree. Before we wrap up, I do want to ask about a little game called Quamp 2.
Yes.
And where did this come? It's such a great idea. It's such a great idea, but it just feels out of left field. And I'm sure, of course, it wasn't. But like, can you give us a little insight to the origins of Quamp 2 and like where it came from, how it came to be?
It started before I was at Atari. Quamp 1 was created by this group under the name Stuffed Wombat. And actually, Stuffed Wombat ended up being one of the individuals, so it's a little bit confusing. You can still find him on Twitter, in which the ball from Pong like escapes the tyranny of the two paddles that it's constantly stuck between and goes on this adventure. It was simple. It only had one button. Atari saw the opportunity to bring that game in-house and be part of the landscape of Atari games, and so it was an acquisition. Once that happened, we brought it in. We wanted to make a sequel. We wanted to like further that narrative, and so that studio group was no longer a thing. So we worked with a company called Graphite Lab, who made Mr. Run and Jump with us, and also made a game called Common Era to take on the task of like making a sequel to this title. For the sequel, we're like, well, what do we do to like? How do you make a sequel to the game with only one button? Well, now it has 2 buttons.
2 buttons?
2 buttons.
Twice as many.
Twice as many. Honestly, I think it's such a simple concept and a simple game, but it's probably my favorite game that we've put out in a little while, and it's worth checking out because it's a short experience, but like you can sit down a couple sessions on a Switch or at your Xbox or your computer and like play it, and it's a very like relaxing kind of zen puzzle experience. I love it.
Thank you so much for taking time to chat with us.
Yeah.
This was wonderful.
It was a huge surprise to run into you guys because of our history.
Yeah.
Because Sarah's winning of a cabinet at PAX West, and I personally was like the one who I was trying to figure it out off my phone, and like we're trying to get cabinet to her, and then it actually ended up coming back to my house, and then I shipped it from my house to yours. So it was like we're connected.
Exactly, we are.
We are connected forever.
I have been married to Sarah for nearly 10 years. We have known each other since high school. Sometimes it's nice when other people get the sudden brunt of Sarah's organizing and solving problems, and suddenly here. It is yes, we are
Very
connected.
effective.
It was a lovely experience. I'm glad to have met her.
And we're very glad to have met you.
Right now we are chatting with Hayden Kane, the social media manager for Cookie Brigade, a group that I've known about for literal years and yet have never actually spoken to anyone here. And so I'm excited to, because you guys do some incredible work for PAX. So first start by like, what's the broad pitch of Cookie Brigade? What is the purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a 501c3 charity. Started in 2007. The simple act of giving a cookie to someone in line, handing out cookies, just 2 guys out of their backpacks. Took some money for Child's Play. They're the official charity of PAX.
Nice.
Started by Gabe and Tycho. It's their charity. And that really has blossomed. I mean, we started growing year by year, more cookies in the backpack, more people handing out the cookies. And now, we're outside our booth right now. It's crazy to think, over the past almost 20 years, we've been, that handing everything out and being in the moment of PAX and really, being a charity ourselves now is awesome. So the whole premise of the Cookie Brigade, we hand out free cookies, take donations for Child's Play. All the cookie donations go directly to Child's Play. We also have our pins, our merch, all that stuff. That pays for the booth and everything. We're a 100% volunteer organization. We don't have a single paid staff member. So that will help with paying for the booth so we don't have to do it, or getting people out to shows. We do all the PAXs. We just started doing MagFest, hoping to branch out to some other shows in the future.
Of course,
But that stuff costs a lot of money. Those activations are expensive. So the pins, we have our Mimic pin here debuting. It's done incredibly well. It's outsold every other pin we've ever done by miles.
I love
And
that.
even our fundraising, we've broken records today alone.
And this is the first day.
Yeah, right. This and what people think generally is the slowest day of PAX. We've raised over $1 million since 2007.
That's incredible.
And
That's
the craziest part is, $400,000 or $500,000 of that has been in the last 4, 5, 6 years. So we're growing extremely quickly. Yeah, exactly.
Just spiking. And so you mentioned you were at MagFest, so you're branching out. Is the plan to branch out to other conventions outside of PAX as well and get a broader team going to collect donations for the charity?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, that's the goal, is branching out. I mean, for an organization of our size, we're at a pretty good number of shows. The thing is that we're all volunteers. So while there's other organizations who have people year round who say, oh, let's go to a show, let's go to this show, can hit 20, 30, 40 shows a year. We can't do that because we all have full-time jobs.
Right.
Yeah, and there's still logistics and there's outreach and
absolutely.
whether or not how that's going to go.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I mean, we have a pretty solid relationship with the vendors at East and all of PAX's really. But it's also the idea of, okay, now you're going to have to be out of the state, out of the country maybe. We did Conquest in the Philippines.
Wow.
It was a crazy show. I wasn't there myself, but we had a great presence there. We did really well.
Nice.
And generally the idea of just like giving out cookies to people is fun. People love it. Whether or not you're generally someone who gives a lot of money to charity or people who have heard of us before or haven't heard of us, everybody likes the idea of having a cookie.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something where even the folks who aren't necessarily the sorts that give to charity are going to talk about, these guys gave me free cookies.
Exactly, because it's not... a lot of the time, the cookies are the gateway to talking about the charity,
Right,
and once you're talking about the charity, then people care and get invested in it.
Let's talk a little bit about the cookies. This is important. The important part. You offer not just regular cookies, but vegan, gluten-free.
Yeah, so the cookies is another thing that's changed throughout the years.
Oh, yeah.
So pre-COVID, we were baking every single cookie by hand. So in 2019, my first year volunteering with the brigade, I got a commercial kitchen and I baked like 3,500 cookies.
Wow.
And we were in there for 18 hours. I
Yep.
rallied up all my friends. We went to Restaurant Depot and bought all the stuff, and we baked probably 3,000 cookies. And then we individually sealed them and all that stuff. It was a ton of fun. In that kind of post-COVID mindset, not just as a vendor, but for the convention as a whole, they don't want people baking things.
Right.
Makes sense.
So we work with a commercial bakery. We work with Feed Your Soul Bakery. It's really nice. They also donate a portion of their sales, including what we pay them for cookies, to charity.
That's wonderful.
So they're a charitable organization as well. We love working with them. We get 11 different varieties of cookies, including the vegan brownie from them. I always tell people the vegan brownie, I'm not vegan myself, so I guess I wouldn't have a good gauge of telling if something's vegan or not, but I had no idea. It's like a block of fudge. It's delicious.
Amazing.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
guys will definitely have to try them after we wrap up.
Yeah.
For the gluten-free cookies, we work with Annie's Gluten-Free Bakery. They're just out of Shirley, Mass, so
Oh, wow.
right close to the center. What's nice about them is a lot of the time you order gluten-free stuff and it's made in a factory or a bakery that also makes products that have wheat flour and
Right.
the
gluten
cross-contamination factor.
Exactly.
And if you're getting anywhere that really cares about that, it's usually either smaller scale or deeply specific, and so the costs become...
Exactly. And especially, I mean, it may be okay for somebody who's just trying to eat less, doesn't want to eat as much gluten, or is, doing it by choice. But
Right.
for so many people with celiac disease and other people who just can't eat gluten, that could be a real problem. I mean, even if it's produced in the same building, it can be really bad for them. So
Yeah.
the owner of the bakery actually has celiac herself. So it's a completely gluten-free bakery, which is
Amazing.
really awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
and they work with us. They're very reasonable on pricing and everything, and we're able to get that. And it's another one of those things where I'm not gluten-free, but I can't tell the difference.
You mentioned merch. We
Yeah.
at PAX love merch. Your buttons and patches, other stuff. Like, how do you make that? Who do you partner with to create that? Because I have to imagine also, like you said, you're making money just to make the next thing, do the next event.
Yeah, so really, we have a couple different people we work with. So all of our pins are done through Penny Arcade.
Oh,
They're
great.
Penny Arcade pins.
Oh, that's amazing.
We do that, obviously. We do have a pin that's not a penny, but the Penny Arcade pins are great because you can get them on the Pin Quest.
Yeah.
So they get published. The marketing is done for you on that end. So all of our show pins are always done through them. We have a couple different designers. We have an in-house designer, like part of our team that does them. And then, are you guys familiar with Tasty
Yes.
Peach?
Yeah,
The plushies?
yeah. Yeah.
So Riss, she owns the company. She did a couple pins for us. So she did the cookie dough pin
Yeah.
and the Mimic, our
Yeah.
new pin. So we'll occasionally have her design things, but we also have an in-house designer that does a lot of our design. The other thing too is we're very unique where we don't have any paid staff. So other charities may have a huge overhead because they have corporate donations. If they miss a show, oh well, you know?
Yeah.
If you have corporate grants and donations coming in, you don't need to worry about it as much. We rely on these shows to survive.
Right.
And granted, we benefit by not having a $200,000, $300,000 overhead for salaries and everything that we have to pay.
Yeah.
And obviously, that does give us an edge. You know, we're completely community funded, and that we love that.
Yeah.
That's what kind of gives us our spunk almost of
Yeah.
we're a community funded organization for the community.
Scrappy charity.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's always ups and downs to not having a full-time staff, and especially being a charity of our size and with our revenue.
Right.
A lot of people are like, what? How do you survive with not having corporate donations? And really, it is the community because we're able to make enough money to survive at events and raise tens of thousands of dollars a show for Child's Play. Although that is one thing that works pretty well is the way we split it. So all the cookies, all the money from cookies goes to Child's Play. We don't take
No ifs,
anything out
ands,
of
or
that.
buts. There it is.
We pay for all the cookies. And then even if someone just gives $1 per cookie, which is about what we pay, we're not taking that dollar. We're not giving Child's Play the profit. We're giving them everything. If we're going to say, oh, we could be in an event, but we can't afford the cookies, Child's Play's going to have to take a step back. We're just not going to go.
Right.
You know, and then kind of back to what you were saying earlier about expanding to shows, other shows, and social media outreach expanding. That gives us the opportunity to build the communities before we get there.
Right.
Because so much about what we have here is that we do have a community with PAX, but being able to build that up for a show like MagFest or a show like Gen Con really are things like, okay, and now if we ever go to Gen Con, we'll be able to have some type of community there. When we continue going to MagFest, we'll have the community there. If we expand to other shows, we'll have some outreach there, which will really help us get our foot in the door.
It's awesome. Well, I'm glad that we got to chat. I'm glad that you reached out. I hope
Yeah,
we get to do this
absolutely.
again.
Absolutely.
It's so good to have you guys here. I can personally speak from experience that it is, you make this event, we can survive this event because of you guys, because of the cookies, and the fact that you're also an awesome kick-ass charity just is the cherry on top.
That's the goal.
There it is. And now I think I'm going to try one of those brownies.
I'm chatting with Seth Fulkerson, the owner and developer for CDI Software, and you might... Oh my God, I just got the pun now.
Oh,
Yeah. Seth, thank you for joining us.
yeah, of course. Thank you for talking to me. Appreciate it.
So, firstly, because I pronounced it several ways, your brand new game, how is it pronounced?
It's Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore.
And so Arzette, for those who don't know, I guess the shortest pitch I can give is what of a CDI game, but good. But what that means is you've created a pretty interesting side-scrolling action platformer. Clearly, there must be some fandom in the Legend of Zelda series going way back to want to make something like this.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Fandom for the wrong things, no.
I mean, like, no matter what, something we talk about on our show is every game is somebody's favorite. And, you know, sometimes those games, like, there's been Zelda collections. No one's ever put the CDI games on there. And maybe that's for legal reasons, but also they deserve some love and attention.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of like sort of bad or underloved games, and the Zelda CDI games fit that bill pretty well.
And so is this something you always wanted to make? Was this an idea that you've had forever? Or did you come to it kind of naturally later on?
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to be friends with a lot of professional artists and animators, and we all have the same shared weird love of Zelda CDI, and also just sort of like early 90s CD-ROM era games in general. So this was always something that we sort of kicked around doing for a long time. After I made fan-made remasters of the Zelda CDI games, the response to that was just, I thought nobody would care, like less than nobody would care. But like a lot of people cared, and we sort of felt like the time was right to start working on a spiritual successor. I announced that I was going to make one on Twitter a long time ago now. Goodness, it was almost 4 years ago now. I got the attention of my producer, Adi Sorley, and we put together a good vertical slice of the game, started shopping it around to publishers. I got the opportunity to pitch to Limited Run Games, Josh Fairhurst. At that time, it was just to do a physical version of the game because we were still assuming that we were going to do Kickstarter.
Right, yeah.
And he saw 2 minutes, a really early work in progress version of the shopkeeper cutscene that's in the game, and he was sold immediately. He was like, let's do this game. So I have the benefit of hindsight now. RZ has released. It came out last month on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it's been just about over a month now.
Yeah, and player response has been overwhelmingly positive. And, reviews haven't been too bad, and it's been doing well. So, like, a huge surprise to me in some ways. Like, I always knew, always set out to make a good game, right? And I knew that I had a good game, but to see people really take to it and understand, like, what I was going for and, like, it's been super rewarding. It's been excellent.
That's incredible to hear. And talking a little before we started recording, mentioning that, coming out the gate with, what if Zelda CDI but better?
Yeah.
Granted, the bar's low on the cultural expectation of Zelda CDI, but also
Very
to
good.
say, does it feel like that gives everyone the right context to engage with it and enjoy it for the love letter that it is?
I think so. Most people who have, like, been into it, like, either they know what's going on or they don't, right?
Right.
And a lot of people are clued into it, but even if they're not, just looking at it, it just looks like nothing else on the market right now, right? So it's just, people are usually just stunned when they see it, one way or the other. And speaking to your point of, like, the expectations are low, yes, but also
They're low,
you
but they're
would
not.
be surprised by
Yeah.
how many diehards. Most of them are very happy with RZ, but some of
good.
them are like, "Oh, you should have done this or that," and I'm like, "Okay."
Okay, and then you remaster them and you make a game for it and you shop it around, buddy.
No, I
know.
I love my fans. I love all the players who have somehow supported this very strange game.
So you mentioned the shopkeeper cutscene before. I think this is something important to talk about. The CDI games have these very, I guess, trippy is the best way to talk about cutscenes where
Esoteric.
That's a good way.
fluid
Yeah.
animations that felt almost like drawn to life-esque. And so I'm curious, when trying to create something purposely limiting because it was limiting for the software, but clearly on the Switch and other things, you have more capacity. Was hitting that needle, was nailing that harder or easier because it was based on a more primitive software style?
It was actually pretty challenging. So in previous interviews, I've talked about, like, how, like, I wrote the game alongside my producer. He was my co-writer. We didn't really, outside of, like, really important scenes, we didn't storyboard. What we would do is each animator would be, like, sort of assign their own scene that I think would really fit them the best. And sort of gave them a lot of freedom to sort of pursue what they wanted to do. Again, most of the animators that worked on this game, this is my dream, right? Because they all want to do Zelda CDI, like, style. Like, they're like, I get to cut loose and really go for it. And so, like, there was, like, a style guide, right? Like a certain resolution, certain, like, colors that you had to hit. From a writing perspective, we wanted to make sure that it was a totally sincere game, no irony.
Right.
The people in this world are strange, but they don't know that.
Yeah.
The humor should just come from it being the way that it is. So, like, nothing that winks at the camera, nothing that's mean-spirited, like, that sort of thing. But yeah, like, just that's a really hard balance to have. But I really think that everybody on the project, again, they knew exactly what they should be doing, and I think we all hit it.
I find that goes best in these sorts of projects when there's passion and when everyone is on the same page as far as understanding the assignment. Was there anything that you ran into, whether when you were first making those remasters or working on Arizet, that it's like, oh, I didn't realize that was an aspect of the CDI look, sound, whatever that we want to preserve, but if I take that away, it doesn't feel like it anymore.
Yeah, there's a few things. So the backgrounds are all hand painted. Each map in the game is an entire painting.
Wow.
Yes, all individually painted. The process was difficult, to say the least. But, I mean, like, early on, it's something we were like, well, we can't do tiles. We can't do, like, tile-based graphics. We can't have it look like that. It has to be hand-painted, bespoke backgrounds. And, like, that's something that if I had the choice, I would desperately not want to do, because it is so difficult to have, like, levels that are readable, but it has to look that certain way. Certain things, like just how the player controls, like You want to stretch it to where it feels snappy and good, but it can't have like extremely like, dodge rolls and stuff, right? Like otherwise you miss the mark and it just doesn't feel like a spiritual successor. For sure, like trying to hit all those marks was hard, but it was satisfying when everything started clicking together.
I mean, to that end, though, you also have added a lot of modern conceits
Oh, yeah.
because you're not a monster.
Oh yeah, well I would hope not. Yeah. At a certain point, like there are people who will put up with that kind of frustration, but this is a Zelda CDI spiritual successor. But there are things that are just expected of modern games that you don't not do. Like there is an unlockable spoilers mode in the game that has lives and all that other stuff.
Oh, nice.
But just from the get-go, yeah, stuff like that, like unlimited lives, generous checkpointing, all those things are important so that people are motivated to want to, play through the game and finish it.
So this kind of game is some of mine and Jeff's favorite because they look like they could run on the original hardware,
Right.
but absolutely could not because of
Yes.
some of the cool stuff you put in.
Nostalgia
Some of
core.
that stuff is music. The music of this game has the similar vibe of the games of that era. It's got that kind of fantasy, sweeping sound. Talk a little bit about the composition and how the music came together for the game.
RZ's soundtrack was composed by Jake Silverman. He's better known as Button Masher on the internet. He's like part of the 8-Bit Band. He won a Grammy for his Kirby remix a couple years ago.
Oh, wow.
And RZ's his first full game like composition. And he used authentic like Roland Sound Canvas hardware and sounds to make music that is like period accurate. Getting that like atmosphere correct was really important. For him, it was important that we like sort of match the style of the Zelda CDI games and games from that vintage while still putting our own spin on it, putting his own spin on it. So I think the soundtrack's one of the best parts of the game. I'm super happy with how it turned out. I don't know what else to say. It's really good.
It is absolutely. So what's the so are you, for whatever the next project? Because it's always congratulations on your new game. When's the next one? Are you going to continue to look at other CDI style projects, or do you want to take a second and figure out where you want to go next?
There's lots of options to go
Excellent.
forward, but there will be more options if RZ does very well. So hoping for it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I guess before we wrap up, we'd love for you to tell folks where they can find Arizet now, what platforms it's on.
Of course, yeah. RZ is available on all modern platforms. It's on Steam, Switch, PS4, PS5, and Xbox Series. You can go to rz.com to get all the links to all those store pages. There is a physical edition, a limited physical edition that's being sold until March 31st. So I don't know if this will go up in time, but we've got like a standard edition. We've got a really swanky collector's edition that's got like an art book, physical version of the soundtrack, other goodies like that.
Oh yeah.
We're chatting with one of the co-devs of Little Lands, Kyle Creamer. Kyle, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I've just played Little Lands, which the tagline is pretty much, what if the new Link's Awakening was also an Animal Crossing game?
That is exactly right.
And so
Cozy adventure.
A cozy adventure, and we just got finished with the demo. And by finished, I mean I could only take my clay pot so far. But we are grateful to be chatting with you. So tell folks a little bit about where this game comes from, like kind of its roots, its origins.
Yeah, absolutely. We call it a cozy quest game. And, when I play Zelda games, I love them and I enjoy the quest. But then when you reach the end and beat the game, I almost would feel this sensation of, well, now what? I want to like stay in this world and do stuff.
Absolutely.
And it almost felt like that was missing. And then conversely, I'd play lifestyle sort of games like Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing, and I'd save up a bunch of money and grow some crops and feel like I want to do something a little more. So really our goal is to mesh those two things together. You can show up in Little Lands and, tend to your garden or catch some bugs, and then you decide, hey, you know what? I want to go for an adventure up in the mountains, and you can go do that. So, that's kind of what makes our game special, I think.
Is that charm that you get from Animal Crossing, like in those kinds of cozy games where there's a little intro moment, cleverly for the demo that we're playing here at PAX, you have like a little, this is a demo. It's not the real game, so please be free, or whatever. Like, it's just very sweet. But like, it does have this kind of dorky humor that a lot of those games have and really leans into it, and I really like it. There's this like unspeakable, hard to find charm in this game that like, it's there. You're not quite sure like what it is, but it just comes together to be this kind of little charming story.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we really want to lean into that exactly right. That charm, that kind of quirky sense of humor. It's a great way of saying it. That's all what makes it, I think, really lighthearted and approachable and fun. It's not a really serious game where you're going to save the world. It's like you're going to save your neighbor from having his hat stolen. So it's very much go at your own pace. It's pretty lighthearted. So I think that makes it really approachable and just easy to play.
So with that in mind, is this something that would have like a larger overarching story, or is it just a thing of here's some adventures, here's a few like quest lines or something to go about?
We plan to have it have a larger narrative so that there's sort of a progression that you can follow, but it's going to be less of, as we say, save the world stakes. I think we plan to lean in a little more on, what are the mysteries of Little Lands and how can I discover that? I think it'll be a lot more like discovery and trying to learn more about this world and kind of exploring to new places and seeing what they're about. So it'll be much more exploration rather than kind of, rescue the princess. We do plan to have, it's not just going to be kind of like a collection of smaller quests. We do plan to have like a larger sort of story campaign.
Very cool.
And so we mentioned that it's this meeting of like the recent Link's Awakening and Animal Crossing because the art style is very much this claymation kind of like little action figure look. Was that more difficult to design with, simpler because you had a clear vision? Like, I'm curious when sculpting, literally sculpting this kind of a look, like what kind of difficulties did you run into, if any?
One of the things that has been a little tricky is we have the camera can be rotated 360 degrees in every area. And that's really cool because you can, it's almost like picking up a toy set and taking a look at it from different vantage points. But it can be challenging because now that also means you don't want people to get stuck where the camera's, clipping through a mountain and you can't. So it can be a little tricky to design areas to be like really looking good from every angle in every area.
Yeah.
So that almost more than anything has been kind of one of the tricky design challenges.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask about that. In a lot of these other games, like the ones we've mentioned, for the most part, you can't rotate the camera. It's fixed and you have to kind of wander around. Did that design choice come from just wanting to make it easier on the player? Is it something that you just wished were in those other games?
Yeah, and that drives actually a lot of our decisions is we wished for this in other games, and that dictates a lot of what ultimately goes into the game and what doesn't. But yeah, I think as we built the world, we very much had that want of like, I want to see what it looks like from this angle and this angle. And it just, once we realized like, oh yeah, we can't not have this. So like, we're going to have to put in the extra work to make it work because we have to have this ability.
Well, that almost makes it feel a little more of leaning into the cozy on those sorts of things, where if you've got something pretty going on and people want to see it, less that than solving the puzzles, where you have those fixed camera angles. That's because you need to see this a certain way, but it's like, no, pick it up, turn it around, look at it a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly right. It lets you, and many people have been doing this as they play the game. They're like, I love this flower, and they just really like fix on it, and they rotate, and they, like that to me makes me so happy. It's like, oh, you're really looking at the world.
Yeah.
Now, say if someone was dumb enough to carry a clay pot all the way from the starting village, and it might impede their ability to use weapons, but I do want to talk about the gear in this game. You do get weapons. You start with a stick. Do you have plans to like add some comedy to the stuff you can find as well?
Yeah, I think definitely, there will be some of the sort of usual suspects in our weapons, very Zelda style stuff for the quest, very, farming stuff for, building your farm. But I think we plan to make some fun little tweaks on that. One example of that I can share is we have in this game, we don't have a fishing rod, we have a catching rod. And it's a multi-purpose tool. You can fish with it, of course. It looks like a fishing rod, but you can also cast it into the woods, into tall grass and catch bugs and you like fish them out. And that to me, that's so Little Lands. Like it's, as you say, that quirky sense of humor. You're casting a fishing line, into the woods and pulling a bug out.
Right.
It's kind of like a little different spin. And also it has the added bonus of it's easier to use than, okay, I got to have a fishing rod and a catching net and I got to have a UI to switch between them. And it's,
right.
So it's like streamlined and it's cute and it's funny. And I feel like that's kind of the ethos of what we want to do, to take a little bit of a twist on some of the existing like gear that you would expect in this type of game.
So you have a health bar and a stamina bar because this is also an action adventure game. Will there be like upgrades to increase both of those? Or what kind of like progression system are you planning for this? Because Zelda doesn't typically have levels. Well, you get more heart containers, things like that. And even in Animal Crossing, you can like expand your inventory things. So like what kind of upgrades and progression are you planning for this game?
There will definitely be ways to upgrade basically like your stamina, your heart meter, you'll be able to upgrade those. You can definitely do things like upgrade your inventory slots. We have in the Twiglet town, one of our early villages, there's a backpack craftsman, and so you can
Nice.
trade gems for an upgraded backpack. So there'll be ways to all the sort of stuff you're using a lot, you'll be able to upgrade or expand, and the progression will be more through that, getting improved gear, and you can increase your heart, increase your stamina, things like that. Yeah.
One of the last things I want to talk about is, so obviously a cozy game like this isn't complete without the music. Can you talk a little bit about the composition and this kind of cozy style of music that you're
Yes.
creating for
Oh,
this?
100%. Yeah, we have a really talented composer on this project, Chipper Hammond, who has done a fantastic job just hitting that perfect vibe of it's a little playful, it's a little adventurous, but it also is so relaxing. And so, yeah, he's done a great job. We actually used an instrument in the composition called a quattro, which
Okay.
is my coworker Jaron likes to call it basically a Venezuelan ukulele, and
Yes.
it's got this like kind of unique but familiar sound that kind of stands out, but is also it's just great. It fits so well. So yeah, Chipper has done an incredible job on the music. Like I've been singing the Little Lands music, like in the elevator, like before I go to sleep, like constantly for the last several weeks. It's he's done a great job.
That's a
So,
good tune right there.
yeah, it's a real strength I think of the game so far.
I also do appreciate, as a non-binary person, that your character is just a character. You're a kid, not really focusing on gender. It looked like all the hair options, all the makeup options, all of them were universal. As I know you said you're going to build out the character creator a little bit. Do you plan to keep that format of just anyone can use anything?
Yeah, 100%. I think that just felt like the right fit for us. The character in Little Lands really is you. So basically, we just want to set you up with the tools to you configure your character how you are, so you can feel like you're showing up authentically in the game. So yeah, we try to just make it very neutral in that way of just pick this hair. It's not gender specific, and that's definitely something we'll keep in the game moving forward.
Well, as someone
Fantastic.
who encounters a lot of the things being locked behind genders, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah,
So thank you for doing
yeah,
that.
appreciate it. Yeah, for sure.
Now, what is the release timeline currently planned for Little Lands?
So the next big milestone we're working toward is a public demo, which is going to be coming later in 2024. Beyond that, we don't have anything specific, so we're just full steam ahead on getting that public demo ready, and it's going to be on PC, and it does have a Steam page right now. So yeah, you can wish
Oh, and so if it has I was going to say Steam page right now, go wishlist it.
Yeah,
Don't
please
even
do.
pause. Just go right
Yeah.
now.
Little Lands.
Little Lands. Well, Kyle, thank you for joining us. This was lovely. You're wonderful. The game I'm very excited for. I hope other people go on quests with ceramic pots. We are now joined by Whitethorn Games, Lisa Muir. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We got to just demo Slime Heroes, which basically you would just get to go on an adventure as a little slime that you create yourself, which I think is the best part. Talk about what attracted Whitethorn Games to this particular adventure.
Oh, absolutely. So, one of the best things about the games that we represent are they're inclusive, they're accessible, they're easygoing, and this one really fits the bill on all that. It's a little less of the more cozy vibe that a lot of our game people know our games for, but it's still that whole representative group of people that play the game. So like you could be 5 years old and play this game, you could be an adult with 10 kids and play this game, and you'll still have time to enjoy it. It's got this adorable aesthetic that's just really approachable, and controls and like mechanics that anyone can pick up and play. I am terrible at any real fighting games, and I have a blast playing this one. So the fact that it just fits into all of that, really good stuff.
Yeah, the controls were very intuitive, and the design is adorable and wonderful to take control of what's considered a minion enemy in most fantasy and make it the hero, the target, and put a narrative behind it. The opening cutscene is about 2 minutes long, but had a lot of heart. It seems like it's important to you guys and this developer to tell a story with heart as well as humor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the whole goal from a narrative standpoint about the game, is a story about finding your power no matter what your strength is on the outside. Pancake Games is one of their main mandates as a studio is to bring diversity and inclusivity and representation and empower underrepresented voices in the industry. The founder, Tomas Gomez, is a member of Black Voices in Gaming and founded a studio to help other creators in the space whose voices aren't normally heard in the games industry. And for people who are lesser represented in the industry, stories like this attract us because we are smaller and finding our power and finding our voice, and it's just kind of stands behind a lot of stuff that Whitethorn Games personally really feels.
Oh, this slime also is able to gain a number of powers and have a good deal of customization as well with those powers. We were seeing before that you are able to get a number of different abilities or whatever, but you combine them and they can affect in different ways.
Yeah. So you can absolutely customize this to however your playstyle is. Like me personally, I like to stand back and not get hit. So there's in the demo you guys got a chance to play. You are able to get 2 attacks. So a whirlwind attack, which is basically a tornado, a static tornado on its initial deploy.
Casting, use.
Yeah,
something.
cast.
Yeah.
And then you also have a projectile. Just from those 2, you can either combine 2 of the same to get a more powerful attack. You can combine the whirlwind with the projectile to have a traveling tornado, or you could combine the projectile with the whirlwind to have a orbiting defense around you of little orbs that'll protect you. And throughout the game, we have a number of different skills that you're going to collect throughout the game, and every one of them can be combined to create basically whatever attacks suit how you like to play. And that's how we like to play. So
Absolutely. And speaking of, before we started recording, I had asked about sort of the planned playtime on this, and you'd mentioned that really most of the games that Whitethorn publishes are no more than 20 hours as far as playtime goes.
Yeah.
Why is that a strong part of the ethos?
our games, again, are for everyone, and that not just like the gamer who's used to, or like me, for example, who's used to the 110-hour RPGs.
Oh, yeah.
But some of us, as we get a little older, don't have time to pick up and play a game, and we still want to game. And then some people who've never played a game in their life are, a little intimidated by something that long. We want something that is easy and it's approachable. You can pick it up, you can play it in small chunks. So every single one of our games, even those games that are longer, for example, you can literally just play like 10 minutes of the game, finish a level or a chapter, put it away, be able to come back to it, kind of thing. It's nothing you have to have a huge time sink into it, but you can if you want to. So it's basically the idea of making sure that everyone who wants to play a game can play a game the way they want to play a game.
Talking more broadly about Whitethorn, you guys have games on a variety of platforms. This clearly, of course, will start on Steam, but I have to imagine this is the kind of game you would want to get onto consoles because it's going to have multiplayer. It's a very pick-up-and-play game. Do you have a game plan for that, or is it focus on PC and then get it to other places?
Yeah, well, for reference, we literally just announced this game
Yes,
during our
fair.
Whitethorn Winter
Yeah.
Showcase. So we'll have a lot of news about this coming up this year. But this game is already coming out for Steam and coming out on Xbox.
Yes.
So, in fact, actually, the developer, Pancake Games, has received support from the Developer Acceleration Program from ID at Xbox. So they're already well under the way of getting that ready to go. So
That's
we
awesome.
can definitely confirm Steam and Xbox.
Amazing.
More news later about other consoles. Can't confirm that at all,
course.
but
It happens when it does or it doesn't.
yeah.
For me, the idea of a cozy game like this on a handheld where you can kind of just sit back and relax while
Yeah.
playing. And I think that's kind of the vibe of all your games. Like we talk about the coziness and the inclusivity, but also the time management, I think all fits into this. There are a lot of games to play, and it feels like your games can kind of fit in between those big games really well. Like you want to take a break from the 160-hour RPG and play a cute little game where you're playing a tiny little slime.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, last year at PAX East, we had a writer who is known specifically. They only really cover shooters. For example, Call of Duty is one of their biggest games.
Yeah, yeah.
And they came to and sat down and played one of our upcoming games, actually launching April 9th. Sorry for the plug.
Please, absolutely.
That's what we're here for.
Bonnie Manor. They came up from their playtime and they looked at me and they're like, I didn't know I needed that, but it's awesome. And I was just like,
That's what you want.
That's what we want. That's what our whole ethos is. So
Gamers need a balanced diet of games.
I agree.
Really, honestly.
Well, we're very excited to get to be among the first to see Slime Heroes. We're excited to hear more about it. You guys have a bunch of other games both coming out and out recently. You want to share some of the other games that folks can look forward to in the coming year?
actually, folks right now can play some of the games that we have on our show floor as part of the PAX East Steam event.
Yeah.
So what we're showing this week, aside from Slime Heroes, we've got Botany Manor, like I said, coming out April 9th for Steam, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. So look forward to that one.
Excellent.
It's a gorgeous plant puzzle game where you take on the role of a retired botanist, Arabella Green, and you get to explore her manor and her research to help bring these long forgotten flora that require very specific conditions to bloom. So that
Amazing.
one's really great. So look forward to that one.
Yeah.
We've got Magical Delicacy. It's kind of like a Metroidvania light meets cooking game,
Nice.
where you're playing the young witch Flora who has traveled to the adventurous town on the seaside called Grat, and you are developing your magical skills by cooking magical treats for the townsfolk.
I'm extremely excited for that one.
Yeah, it's really fun, and the developer Scola has put a lot of effort into the game design. Hope everyone gets a chance to check that one out. And last but not least, coming out this summer, we have Mythwrecked and Brosia Island from Polygon Treehouse, who are behind the BAFTA Award-nominated Roki. It's a really rich, deep narrative story with a lot of adventure and treasure hunting in place. You're playing as Alex, who is a backpacker who got shipwrecked on this gorgeous Mediterranean island, only to discover that it is populated by the gods of Greek myth and legend. So it's up to you to befriend each one of these gods to figure out how you're going to find your way home. But there is a twist. There is a mystery on the island, as the gods have all forgotten who they are and seem to be scared of each other. So you're going to be finding your way home. You're going to be hunting treasures. You're going to be building your relationships with each of them through favors of the god, deep conversations, and treasure hunting so that they can return favors in order for you to help your exploration and your further secrets throughout the island. It's fantastic, and I hope everyone gets a chance to play it because it is so relaxing. If you can't get away on a vacation, this is the place to just hang.
Good to know. Good to know. I think I
Yeah.
might have to go there after we get back from
Right?
this weekend. Oh my gosh, I could use that vacation. Well, that sounds like an incredible lineup, and I hope some of our listeners check those out, and I hope more people check it out here this weekend. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me and helping us amplify our games.
Ben Qualo, founder and CEO of Midwest Games.
My name is Eka from Mojican/Toge Productions.
My name's Jaron Moore. I'm the executive producer at Apogee Entertainment.
My name's Ethan Stearns. I'm the VP of Games at Atari.
My name's Hayden Kane. I'm the social media manager and an organizer for the Cookie Brigade.
I'm Seth Fulkerson. I'm a developer, owner of CDI Software.
I'm Kyle Creamer. I'm working with Apogee Entertainment.
I'm Lisa Mior from Whitethorn Games, the director of communications.
Happy gaming!
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.